What salesperson self-owned and lost your business? I've begun researching my next car. I'm not looking to make a purchase for the next few months, but I like to do my homework. I had a couple of meetings cancel on me one day, so I decided to run by the closest Hyundai dealer to see their new hybrids in person. I'm currently a Honda guy. I had a great conversation with the actual salesman, a good test drive, and he understood my plans. We returned to the dealership and I grabbed a booklet on the Ioniq as he went to take the keys back and find me a business card. In the meantime, his sales manager approached me and asked 4 times, "What do I need to do to get you to leave in a new Hyundai?" Refusing to listen to what both the salesman and I were saying. To top the visit off, the manager grabbed my hands and began to pray that I would wise up and get a Hyundai. Over the next 36 hours, I received 11 phone calls and text messages from the dealership, attacking me about getting back in to buy and eventually accusing me of only going in for the test drive gift card promotion that I wasn't aware of. I was at a furniture store looking for a new dresser. I found one for a reasonable price and might have come back after doing some more shopping around if the salesman hadn't tried to upsell a couch despite me saying repeatedly that we do not need a couch. That's why I like IKEA. It's cold and impersonal, which should incidentally be Sweden's national motto. But then what will Finland's be? Cold, impersonal, and violently drunk. A car salesman told me the van I was looking to buy had brand new brakes and tires. God man, pick something less obvious to lie about. I just went back to the van, checked, and sure enough the tires were almost bald and the rotors were grooved to the touch. He got his manager involved and now they're trying to convince me that the work was done. Like how? But I'm apparently an idiot. They didn't say that, but they knew I caught them in the lie, so I just left. This experience was the last straw and it convinced me to buy a brand new car instead. The narrator has done a bit of pre-reading and it seems like the absolute worst of our stories are mostly car dealer related. Which just goes to show what many of you have been writing in the comments is correct. Half the people working in dealerships are basically your high school bullies after finding out they weren't qualified to do anything else. Asked a Subaru salesman what the best price he could give me was on a 2014 Crosstrek with 40k miles. He told me the same price that a brand new one goes for. I informed him of that and asked why I'd buy this one for that price instead of just buying a new one. All he said was that they hold their value really well. That was the end of my search at that dealership. I love Subarus. My experience at the dealership was similar. I'd researched online, even emailed back and forth with the dealer and had a price set, but I needed to drive it first. Went in, drove the car, dealer came into me with a price $2,000 over the sticker price and $4,000 over what they'd agreed with online. I'd pulled up my email on the phone and showed it to the manager and left with the car for the price I wanted. But my god, I was livid when they pulled the over-the-sticker price BS. Called me about 20 times in the course of 3 days while we were in the ICU with our 3-year-old daughter due to a medical emergency. They wanted us to set up an appointment to get a roofing quote. We explained to them multiple times what had happened to stop and would call them back, but they kept calling. I finally went off on the poor lady who called the final time and she apologized so much, but the damage was done and we never called back that particular service. I had a salesman ask to speak to my husband instead of me, as he would never let his wife handle such a big financial decision. Did that go as well as I think it did? Oh, much worse. When I was just out of school and looking for my own car insurance, my dad helped me narrow down companies and contacted an agent for me to get the ball rolling. The agent called me to go over things, but then started trying to upsell me a renter policy on top of the auto policy. Oh, your dad asked me to also set this up for you. No, he didn't. Lying is not a good way to get business from me. Went to a Honda dealership to look at a Civic, and the sales guy told me that they didn't have any in stock somehow. He showed me an Accord, which was nice and all, but I was looking for something cheaper and with better MPG. He tried to convince me to buy it by saying it was heavier, which meant it was more reliable. I laughed at him and left. Told a car salesman that I wanted my wife to look at the car so I'd be coming back. He went and got the sales manager, who proceeded to sit down across from me and say the words I won't forget. Let me ask you a question. Whose money is it, yours or hers? I looked at him in shock and politely stood up and left. Never been so stunned by a salesman before or since. Years ago, my sister-in-law, my brother's girlfriend at the time, was looking at apartments with her best friend. At one location, one of them asks some oddly specific questions about something, like do the pipes make noise at night, and the landlord replied, "Is this in regards to the alleged haunting?" He started hitting on my wife, thinking the minivan was for her. What a fool. He should have been hitting on you the whole time. You can do all kinds of things back here, maybe even with the guy who'll sell it to ya. Wink. We felt really talked into the whole thing, and when he was finally lining up the paperwork, he high-fived his manager. We walked away. I was trying to buy a Honda and apply the Honda graduate program. Was signing papers for the keys when I noticed the missing amount. The sales manager told me I was getting such a good deal they couldn't add that on top. So I stopped signing and told him I'm no longer buying and won't be negotiating. The look on his face was excellent as I got up to leave. I got an even better deal no more than a week later. Looking at some lower-end sporty cars, I know my way around a motor. A guy pops the hood and says, "We like to leave everything exactly the way it was when we buy it from someone. It has a cheap falling-apart intake, oil spilling from both valve covers. I get inside, there's sticky black stuff around the shifter, the car smells, but damn, they couldn't even be bothered to clean the damn car or spray in some Febreze." You'd be surprised at how common this is. Dealers love to cut corners on trade-ins and will do the bare minimum, sometimes not even that, to get the car on the lot. The sales manager at the dealer I used to work at got in a huge fight with one of the mechanics because the mechanic was inspecting a trade-in and found many serious mechanical problems. By that, I mean problems that would lead to the engine catching fire or the driver getting stranded on the side of the road. The manager told the mechanic not to fix these problems, but instead cover them up to the best of his ability. The mechanic refused to comply and a screaming match ensued. The manager ended up getting someone else to do the cover-up job. That's why it's really important to have an experienced mechanic or at least a knowledgeable car person inspect a used car before you decide to buy it. When I was in the army, I went to Best Buy to buy a car stereo. After picking one out and talking to the sales rep while we waited for another rep to grab the radio from the back, the rep I was talking to started talking to me about God and how women are demons and I need to stay away from them. At this point, I didn't really know what to say, so I just tried to change the subject. He then asked me if I had a girlfriend. I told him yes, but she's been in Afghanistan for the last 6 months. He then told me that her being deployed is a blessing in disguise because now she won't tempt me into committing sin. I just walked out after that. I was too shocked to actually say anything. I was at the VW dealership and told him I was also thinking of looking at Hyundai. The salesman told me to think twice, because if I get a Hyundai, I'd better also get good insurance, because I'm going to crash and or die in that car. I got a new salesman, and I still got a VW. I can imagine that this is something a salesman could possibly allude to happening at the very end of a sales pitch if they feel like their customer's about to walk away and they have nothing to lose anyway. Even then, it's a bit weird, but opening with that is just hilariously bold and a wild thing to do. On an unrelated note, if you don't watch all of the videos on our channel, you will get diabetes and or die. Allegedly. Don't fact check. My dad and I were out shopping for my first car. Me being 16 and stupid, I found a used Challenger that I wanted desperately. And to my immense surprise, my dad agreed to co-sign for me. As my dad and I were negotiating the price of the car and what things the dealership could add to sweeten the deal, the salesman implies that I, my father's 16-year-old daughter, was his other woman, and that my 42-year-old father was going through a midlife crisis. My father went white as a sheet, and then the same beautiful cherry red of the Challenger. And needless to say, I did not get that car. Instead of getting a cool car that I would have inevitably gotten a surplus number of speeding tickets with, I bought my aunt's '99 Ford Explorer. After replacing parts of the AC system, it runs like a champ. I love that SUV. Yes, the insurance would have been absolutely astronomical if I'd actually managed to get the Challenger. In hindsight, I'm fairly certain it was my dad attempting to show me how to buy a car from a dealership. 16-year-old me thought he was cool as heck for at least entertaining the idea. And no, my father is not Roy Moore. We're from Georgia, not Alabama. You've got to wait till they're 18 to boink your relatives in Georgia. We went to buy an engagement ring, and the salesman looked at me right when we walked in the door and said, "We don't sell children's rings here." I was 27 at the time, and yes, petite. We went elsewhere. I'm a girl. My boyfriend got me into motorcycles a few years back, and I was determined to buy my own. Once I had the money for one, we went to a handful of dealerships around town. Only one guy at one of the dealerships actually talked to me about buying a bike. Everyone else would look straight at my boyfriend and answer the questions I was asking. There were several places we ended up walking away from even if we knew that they had a decent option for me, all because they didn't believe that I actually knew enough of what I was talking about to buy my own bike. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. GNC. I told the guy I was looking for a pre-workout and he asks what I usually use. I told him and he literally laughed at me, then shows me a bunch of new brands that cost about twice as much. Meanwhile, he's throwing out a bunch of scientific nutritional terms. I left and I haven't been back. Not me, but my parents. My mum and dad were meeting with a sales guy who worked for a pool company when they were looking to get a pool built. He was a standard sales guy, and at one point he tried to mention some add-on or something. My mum started to interject, and the sales guy was basically like, "Oh, don't you worry. Why don't your husband and I talk about the money details?" He said a few other things along those lines and was overly condescending, the whole, "How about you sit tight while the men talk business" sort of mentality. My mum looked at the guy for a second, then to my dad, and then stood up and said, "You know what? I think we're done here." As she and my dad stood up to leave, the sales guy apparently kind of stammered, then smirked, looked at my dad and said, "Oh, come on, okay, let's continue," thinking it was some kind of joke. My dad responded, "Nope, you heard my wife, we're out of here." And that was that. I was broke but desperately needed a new car, so I went down to a local dealership to see if they had anything with a monthly payment that I could afford. I handed over the keys to my car so they could do an appraisal, but I didn't even get a chance to fully explain my situation before they were shoving me in an Infiniti I knew was beyond my price range. I test drove it just to humor the sales guy while explaining that I needed something cheaper than this, but he just kept saying, "We'll see how the financing works out." We get back to the dealership and he tells me he wants to run my credit. The pushiness has already turned me off completely, so I've already decided I'm not buying from them. I tell him no. He looks at me like I just threw number 2 in his face. "You won't let me run your credit," he said with stunned incredulity. And then he started calling out to the other salesman. "He won't let me run his credit. Can you believe that?" The other salesmen all shared his shock like I was committing some unforgivable insult by not letting him run my credit. Next thing I know, I'm being herded into a manager's office where he starts giving me the spiel about how I clearly don't appreciate how much they're trying to help me out. "But I don't want the car," I said. He continued on like I said nothing, telling me how they're trying to help me out and how I don't realize what a great deal they can make me. I finally had enough, so I said, "Listen, I'm not buying that car from you, and at this point there's nothing you could say or do to get me to buy any car from you, so give me back the keys so I can go somewhere else." And then he actually said to me, "I'll give you the keys back when I'm ready." He realized almost immediately that he had screwed up though, because as soon as he said it, he got up and went and got my keys. At that point, I was so enraged that I probably would have punched him if he hadn't got up to get them immediately. I drove off and never went back. In short, went used car shopping, and used car salesmen tried to bully and intimidate me into buying a car that I didn't want and couldn't afford anyway. I went with my wife to buy a car. The salesman said that another couple were also looking to buy it, but he'd prefer us to have it because they were homosexuals. He even said, "Homosexuals," in that stereotypical gay voice and went limp-wristed. I hope those guys are happy with their car. I hope those guys bought a car somewhere else. The narrator also hopes that that awful man didn't get any money from anyone, especially the people he was slandering in his place of work, and that the people he said it to complained to his manager. Although, as we've established, his boss probably would have laughed and high-fived him. If you're one of the non-reprehensible car salesmen of the world, the narrator apologizes for his slander. Your place of work just seems to come up with so many of these stories. Went to look at a car. Salespeople saw me and went into the office, an interesting tactic since they normally come out and ask if they can help. So I open up and look inside, look for rust in the usual spots like under the wheel arches, look at the color of the exhaust, and inspect the window rubbers, which looked to be a bit dodgy, and then I lie down to get a good look underneath. It's used, so I wanted to see if there was oil leaking from the front or rear. When the guy finally walks up to me and asks if he can call me an ambulance, he made some snarky comment about me lying on the ground. At this point, I was put off, but they'd made me wait about 20 minutes before coming out, so I took it for a test drive. When the guy gave me the sales spiel on the car, there were 3 main points on the car. We were driving and he gets a phone call. He didn't notice I saw the screen that said office phone when it rang, and he proceeds to talk as if he's talking to a customer who's coming to buy the car in 15 minutes' time. He repeats the 3 sales items and then carries on talking as if the guy is very keen. They're so obvious. I hate dealing with used car salesmen. An ADT security salesman at my door. I was actually contemplating it, but said I'd take the info and talk to my wife. Do you have to get her permission for everything? I paused and went wide-eyed and then said, I talked to my wife about financial decisions. Get the frick off my property. I had a phone salesman call me up and try to get me to extend my phone plan. If you sign up now, you also get a laptop. What kind of laptop? It's red. I had a car salesman tell me, debt is a good thing. It'll teach you how to manage your money, when I objected to $3,000 worth of upgrades. I asked him if this was what he told all of his 22-year-old female clients or if I was just special. He declined to answer. Looking at a wedding venue. It was lovely, the sort of place we were looking to get wed, and the price was okay, but the saleswoman just did a bad job. This is where you and your groomsmen can hang out before the wedding. It's our man cave. He'll be kept out of the way in the man cave. You can have beers with your boys in the man cave. Beers with the boys. She just kept dropping these phrases in. They were a bit stupid to start with, but it was nothing but offensive and grating by the end. It totally turned me off the whole place, and my now wife agreed with me. It felt patronizing, artificial, and just lazy. At a Honda dealership when I had to ask for the keys to my car back for the 3rd time. I only started cursing when I asked the 4th time. Yes, the deal he offered me was great. Even looking back, I was probably foolish for walking away from it, but I told him the moment I met him and reiterated several times that I wouldn't be making a purchase that day. I foolishly handed over my keys so that they could do an appraisal on my current car, which I knew they'd only give me $500 for. I knew that going in there, no matter what I did, I was going to go home and think about it overnight. I bought a Toyota down the street 2 days later. For me, it wasn't the salesman, but the financing guy. I was out car shopping and found one I liked at the first place I went. But of course, I wanted to check out a couple of other places. They were pushing an interest financing thing. I wasn't planning on doing financing at all, but for 0 interest, I could just let my salesman get that and then just pay it all off a week later. So the salesman suggested I just chat with the finance guy before I left. That guy was a fricking member. Acted like I was some huge jerk for wanting to actually look into more than one car before making a big purchase like that, and just wouldn't stop. I generally try not to be rude to people who are just trying to do their jobs, but I had to leave his office while he was talking because he would not stop. Told the salesman on the way out that if I didn't come back, finance jerk was why. I was looking to buy solar panels for my house. I got one consultation from a really nice sales lady who was very friendly, but completely knew her stuff inside and out. She had done her research, had printouts of my house's roof from Google Earth, showed me how many panels they'd lay out, among other things. I told her I was going to get a few other quotes, and she said it was perfectly fine, please just let her know what I decided. So I called around and set up 3 other quotes. First 2 were fine, just more expensive or not as good terms overall. The 3rd place, though, Varango Solar. Yikes. I got a call from their sales guy who refused to come to the property, said he could do it all from the office. So he looks at the roof printout and tells me that he can offer about 2/3 of the panels as the other companies did, and I asked why, and he says, basically, because. So I say 3 other companies are offering between 17 to 18 panels, whereas he's only going to do 13. He claims they're wrong and gives me some nonsense reasoning. I say, okay, well at least they're cheap. So I tell him thanks, I'm going to go cover all of my options and I'd call him in a few days. I got calls from him every day for the next 3 days. After 2 days of still thinking, he comes back to me and says he's figured out how the other companies got more panels on the roof. They rotated them differently. Go fricking figure. On the 3rd day, I said I wasn't interested, thank you. So I got a call that same day from his manager asking why I wasn't interested. I told him that even though they were the cheapest, their inept sales attitude and extremely pushy manner from every person I'd talked to there made me never want to do business with them ever. He tried to talk me out of my fricking opinion, and I calmly told him to never fricking call back again, please, and hung up. Meanwhile, the nice lady at the other company, now Sunrun, hadn't bothered me once. I called her and said let's do it, and I haven't regretted it one day since. She worked her butt off to get me a very close price to the cheapest option, even after I told her I was going with her company. It ended up only being like $300 more than Varango Solar. Serving staff. What's the most awkward first date you've seen go down while working? At the end of the dinner, two couples on a double date dine and dash. I chased them down and the girls had no clue. Their dates had told them they'd already paid. The girls ended up paying. The guys had no cash. As a former server, I have to say it's not the first dates that stick out, it's the "we're breaking up and let's have dinner and talk about it" tables that really stay with you. My wife broke up with me while we were dating at an Indian restaurant. We made up and have been married about 8 years now, but it took a darn long time before I could eat Indian food again. More sad than awkward, a guy in a wheelchair came in at about 1:45. Says he has a date at 3, but the only ride he had there was early. So I sat him at a table for 2, he munches on bread for a while and decides to go outside for a bit. He ends up coming in about 20 minutes later and starts telling me and the host I'm working with cheesy jokes. He also mentions that he used to be a policeman before he became wheelchair-bound. He also told us his date is from Panama. The other host and I had a bad feeling about this situation at that point. 3 o'clock rolls around and I see the guy anxiously glancing between his phone and the door. About 45 minutes of this pass before he finally leaves. This was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. I was a line cook at a restaurant. It was a typical Friday night and pretty busy in the kitchen. A server came in and asked if I spoke Chinese. I said yes, and he told me to go talk to some guest at a table. I told him they'll have to wait because we're in the middle of a dinner rush. About an hour later, things slow down a little, so I follow up with the server. He proceeded to point out the table of guests that needed help. So I walked out of the kitchen with the expectation of maybe translating the menu for them or something. When I got up to the table, I noticed it was a white guy and an Asian girl. So I asked the gentleman how I could help him. He then asked me to translate for him. It was at that point that I realized they were on a first date. The guy asked me to translate a few things for him like, "How did you enjoy the dinner?" and "Did you enjoy the date so far?" and other small talk. And I'd have to translate that to the girl and translate her response back to English for him. This went on for about 5 to 10 minutes. Eventually, he asked me to ask the girl if she wanted to sleep with him. The girl asked him if he had a girlfriend. I had to stand there and translate this conversation. Eventually, the girl shot the guy down, and it got pretty awkward at that point, so I found an excuse to go back to the kitchen. In short, had to translate for a guy and asked the girl if she wanted to do the deed with him. I'm honestly just flabbergasted that they arranged this date with such a big hurdle in making basic conversation in place. I think if I had to do this while working, they'd have to get one question in at a time between me, doing my job that they're keeping me from. A young couple was at my table. They were probably 16. She was way overdressed for Red Lobster and a movie, but that was cute. He went to pay and his card was declined. I felt so horrible walking back to the table. He said there should be plenty in his bank account and I asked if he'd put gas in his car before the date. He said he filled up his truck. Some gas stations here hold the amount twice on a debit card after a certain hour and it drops off the next day. The poor kid was so embarrassed he had no idea what to do. My boss paid for his meal, my tip, and gave him money for the movie they were planning to go to. The kid came back in 2 days later with all of the money to pay my boss back. Man, this story. I've never associated Red Lobster with classy, but your boss changed that. I can't believe he even gave some cash for the movie, too. Bartender here. Had a guy this past summer come in for Match.com meetups 4 different times with 4 different ladies. For one of his dates, he told everyone else at the bar that he was from Match.com. His date was late, so everyone at the bar was concerned for him. He told everyone to clap when she arrived. When she finally came, everyone at the bar clapped and cheered. She was horribly embarrassed. No wonder why this guy doesn't hold on to girls for long. She'll be on guard from the second she walks in the door. Why not just get everyone in the place to yell out, "Norm!" Had a professor in college that had us clap when a student would walk in late. He had a really good laugh when we did it when he was late. I'm a hostess, and when we seat people, we have to talk about the specials happening that day. Well, anywho, 2 people came in and they don't appear to be a couple. Both were very stern looking. I started giving my spiel about the drink specials, and she cuts me off and says she won't be drinking tonight. The guy looks at her and asks why. She tells him that she's pregnant. And let's keep in mind that I'm right here between them with no option to walk away because I'm still holding the menus. Well, he freaks out, quickly questioning her, and getting very angry, she starts yelling at him. A lot of tension is floating around, and in the midst of all this anger about being prangent, I chime in and mention that we're also having a special on our baby back ribs. The moment after I realize what I just said, they're staring at me with their jaws dropped. I look them dead in the eye and walk away. I'm not good in these types of situations. Yes, we have some baby back ribs on special, as well as a nice Asian stir-fry with baby bok choy and baby corn. We also have a lobster special that of course comes with a bib. There's also a cheese platter featuring Baby Bell. What can I get started for you? This happens to a friend of mine. We'll call him Alex. Because for this situation, we need a unisex first name. He's on a blind date with a friend of a friend. Alex gets a table at a fairly fancy restaurant that his friend Steve works at as a manager. He arrives first and she gets there about 15 minutes late. No big deal, they chat over drinks. At this point, he doesn't think it's going super great, but doesn't think it's too awkward. At some point after they ordered their food, she excuses herself to the bathroom. A minute or so after she leaves the table, he gets a text on his phone. It's from his date. It says something along the lines of, "I hate blind dates. This guy is a total loser. At least I'll get a few free meals out of him." Alex realizes that the text wasn't meant for him, but for his date's female friend, also called Alex. He gets up from the table and finds Steve in the back and tells him what happened, asks for his half of the order taken off the ticket, and then leaves before she gets back to the table. Alex's date comes back from the bathroom, apparently unaware that she texted the wrong person. Due to some mix-up, the entire order still arrives at the table. Reportedly, she didn't even wait for or even question Alex's absence before she began eating. In fact, she finishes nearly all of her meal before asking her waiter to check where Alex had gone. The waiter checks with his manager, Steve, finds out about the situation and informs her that Alex left while she was in the bathroom. He then hands her the check. The best part is that she didn't have enough money to cover the check. She had to call a friend to come down to the restaurant and pay for her meal. Steve wasn't too keen on letting her slide on the bill. In short, woman accidentally texts her date about only going out with him for free food. He sticks her with the check. I have been waiting so long to tell this story. So I'm a server at Red Robin, and I once served a teenage couple, probably around 17 or 18, easily seniors in high school. They'd obviously been dating for a while since they already knew what they wanted and ordered for each other. The date night seemed to go pretty well. They ordered their drinks, ordered an appetizer, then ordered their food. Only their drinks had come out, yet when finally holding hands for a long while, the guy looks into the girl's eyes and apparently broke up with her. I'd been standing from a distance, keeping an eye on my tables, when suddenly I see this happening and watch the girl's face just turn from happiness to absolute horror. Tears well up and she starts banging her fists on the table, screaming out at him that he's a butthole and whatnot. Everyone in the restaurant can hear it and everything just stops. As she's becoming more and more volatile, he's trying to calm her down. I'm not sure what to do at this point. Even my manager had come out and looked at me as if we both don't know how to handle this. Finally, the guy yells, "Fine, fine. If you don't want to be civil, then I'll go." She begs him to stay, but he pries himself away and beelines for the door. She doesn't follow him. He passes me on the way to the door, stops and walks back towards me. He hands me $50 and says, "You can obviously already see why I did what I did. I'm just sorry that you had to deal with this here and now. Take care of her and make sure she's okay." He then leaves. She sat for the next 3 hours, not crying but just staring blankly into the wall. She ate both of their meals and the tower of onion rings. On another note, a lady crapped herself at my work once. In short, broke up, broke down, and broke waistline. I'm somewhat unclear whether the lady that made brown in the server's workplace was one and the same person who ate the 2 meals and the tower of onion rings. It seems very probable, but it's written in such a way that they've preserved the mystery. Seems like the cherry or piece of gooey fudge on top of this miserable experience. Guy comes in alone and asks for a table for 2. I seat him in the corner in a booth where it's quiet and secluded. He says his date should be here any minute. I get him the beer he ordered and a bunch of chips and salsa. 20 minutes later, he's on his second beer and he promises me that she's going to be here soon. She just texted him and said she's on her way. I really don't care because it's really slow and I like the guy because he's super low maintenance. I brought him out some queso to go with the chips he was eating alone. An hour goes by. There were 2 instances of a single woman coming in saying she was meeting someone, and both of those women were directed to this guy. But neither of them were his date. Now I'm just kind of feeling bad for the poor fella. 3 hours after I sat him down, he had had 9 beers, and I brought him a few rounds of shots occasionally just because we, the entire staff, felt so bad for him. He was fricking lit. He goes out the back door to start chucking up in an alleyway, as his date finally walks through the door. I sat her down at their table, get her a drink, and then went out back to give the guy a smoke and let him know his date was here. He was not happy. I walked him back inside, sat him down, and watched them formally introduce each other. I didn't realize this was a blind date. I left awkwardly and immediately. They paid and left maybe 5 minutes after that, just enough for the lady to finish her drink. I guess she gave him a ride home, but I don't really know. I didn't think she was actually going to show up, otherwise I'd have cut him off well before that. Oh well, hope he got some action that night. Who does she think she is, showing up 3 hours late for a date? To be somewhat fair, when she did arrive, she looked like she'd been crying her eyes out and seemed incredibly flustered. I didn't want to pry, especially considering the drunk mess she was about to have a date with. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Well, I'm assuming bartending is close enough to serving staff since I did serve the food as well. I did this for a number of years, but one story, man, this stands out. This younger lady came in by herself, comes up to the bar, and says she'd like a table in the back alone. It's a slow night and I was working alone, so I sat her, brought her a drink. She's there for about an hour, has a couple of drinks, and keeps checking her phone. I finally ask her if she's expecting someone, and her response was a sad smile and a nod. Almost immediately after that, this guy, early 30s, comes in and asks for a table for two. This guy reeks of D-bag. On his arm is this slightly trashy, very early 20s girl who's already drunk, loud, and freaking obnoxious. She keeps talking about how lucky she is to finally get this guy out with her. How it's been the best first date ever. I get them their food order and they can barely keep their hands off each other. I also notice that the lady sitting by herself has gone white as a ghost and is shaking a little bit. She takes out her cell phone and takes a few pictures. About this point, I know what's going on and I just try to avoid it. Lady number one walks up, puts some papers down on the table and says, "We're getting divorced." She then looks at the lady who turns out to be her little sister and tells her to never talk to her again. She then comes up, pays for her meal and walks out, leaving the most utterly destroyed first date I've ever seen. It was phenomenal. Yeah, I got a few more of the details when she came back later, but her husband didn't know it was his sister-in-law. And this was not the first time he'd cheated, just the first time with the sister. So maybe a stretch, but I figured it was close. Yay, something I can finally answer. I once had a table where this guy came in for a blind date. When the girl got there, it was obvious she was already a little tipsy. Well, a little ways into the meal and after having one drink, she chucked up all over herself at the table. She went to the bathroom and the guy had to ask another server to go and check on her. In the bathroom, she also proceeded to empty her guts all over the toilet seat. I felt so bad for the guy, but he was so nice about it. He waited for her to get cleaned up and took her home. That must have been the most awkward car ride ever. We have a rich, middle-aged dude that comes in almost every Friday with a new date. A couple of servers I work with have a pool if the date will last shorter or longer than 30 minutes. Unders have won, probably 70% of the time. I think the best story I heard from one of his dates was when he asked where the lady was from. She answered Miami and he told her to leave. Weird dude. I was a waitress in college. A couple came in and sat at my table. Just your average Minnesota man and a nice Latina lady. They started chatting and it immediately became clear to me that she speaks no English. None. It turns out I'm fluent in Spanish, so I went back to take their order, and I sat and translated for them for a bit. It was awkward, but okay. I went back a few minutes later to drop off their appetizer, and this man looks at me and says, "I can't do this. Tell her I'm leaving." I said, "No, absolutely not." He said, "Well, I'm leaving whether you tell her or not, so you probably should." As I started to panic, both of them just burst out laughing. Turns out they're regulars that have been married for 20 years. They were trolling me after a friend told them I spoke Spanish. That is devious and brilliant. I hope they tipped you supremely well, madam. This one starts out awkward, but it takes a bit of a turn. I'm a host. I sat a gentleman very well dressed named Greg, who told me he was meeting a girl for their first date. About half an hour passes and no one shows up. It's a Sunday night, so it's pretty slow. I came by and checked on him. He hadn't heard from her or anything. Another half hour, then another. He finishes his entree, pays, and walks up to me and says, "Damn, she's not coming. Whatever." I try to convince him to stick it out at the bar for a little bit, but he isn't having it. He leaves. 20 minutes later, a girl shows up. She says her phone is dead and her car broke down on the way to her date with a guy named Greg. I say he got fed up and left, and she starts to cry because she really thinks she messed up. I tell her it'll be okay. The guy signed up for a rewards program and we had his cell number. Officially, I'm not supposed to do this, but I called him back up and told him his date was here, and he didn't believe me, so I put her on the phone and he was back 20 minutes later. They seemed to really hit it off, and as he left he said, "Thanks man," and he slipped me a 5. The only direct tip I've ever gotten. They just came in together yesterday. It makes me really happy that they're still dating. I was working at a restaurant and this guy I'd met a few days before came in before my shift ended to wait for me. He was going to take me out as soon as I finished. He was a few hours early. I brought him a drink and told him it would be a while, and he said that was fine. The place got pretty busy, and after a while I noticed there was a girl sitting down with him having a drink. I went over to bring him another beer and she was drinking as well. I served them more drinks, he introduced her as an old friend from school, and she kind of just gave me a quick up and down, seemed annoyed, and started chatting away with him, giggling at everything he said. It was a bit weird to watch. My boss asked me if I could stay late because it had become so busy, but I said no. I'm actually going on a date and pointed him out. She laughed and said, "Really? With the guy who's been drinking with that other girl?" I sheepishly said yes. The girl had left just before I was done, but he was pretty drunk by that point, so I asked him if he still wanted to go, and he said, of course. Anyway, he ended up being so wasted that I left and went home. I went out with him again and again. He got way too drunk and passed out each time. I turned him down the next time he asked. About a year later, I was working at a different bar and they walked in newlyweds. I found this out when she told the bartender she wanted to beat me up or something because I was trying to take her man. She didn't, and I told the bartender what happened, but I'd be interested to hear how she perceived what was happening. So yeah, that was pretty much the most awkward first date I've seen while working as a waitress, and it was mine. So I work at Great American Cookies as a cake decorator, and we get "Will you be my date" cakes all the time. Sometimes the customers give us flowers or a card to give to the person that comes to pick it up. Like boyfriend orders cake, gives us a flower, girlfriend picks up cake, and we give her the flower. Kind of like singing messengers. One day an older male came up and ordered a cake for his wife's birthday and asked if we could give her an envelope as she was the one to pick it up. Just curious, we asked him what was in it. He said tell her to open it there with us and she'd tell us all about it, that it was a surprise. We agreed and he paid for the cake, and later that day the wife comes up and gets the cake and envelope. She loves her cake even though it's pretty simple, and opens the envelope as he had instructed. She starts bawling her eyes out. This guy had had us serve her the divorce papers. We noticed he was standing only a few feet away. He was a scumbag Steve if I've ever seen one. Long story short, we don't take envelopes without the customers telling us exactly what's inside from then on. Oh, and he got us to serve papers for free when anyone else would have charged $50. Didn't even tip us for having to deal with his crying, soon-to-be ex-wife. In short, scumbag Steve made a cake decorator serve his wife divorce papers when she came to pick up her birthday cake. Not really a waiter, but I worked as a barista and witnessed numerous obvious first dates. One time, this super nerdy guy brings in this pretty attractive girl. I'm rooting for him because I used to be quite nerdy and had a tough time with the ladies. Anyway, the guy starts talking on and on about his favorite sci-fi and fantasy books, as well as some card game that sounded similar to D&D. There's nothing wrong with those interests, but the girl was clearly not receptive. She was giving him all kinds of physical and verbal cues that she wanted to change the discussion. But this guy would not stop talking. While I was watching, I wanted to help him, tell him to change the subject or something, but I couldn't think of any smooth way to help him out. Maybe it was because he was nervous. He gets up to go to the bathroom and knocks the table, which causes the girl's hot latte to be spilled all over her front. He apologized profusely, but you could see that she had checked out of the date. She left after drying herself. I hope he found a girl that appreciates sci-fi books and Piers Anthony as much as he does. You should have spilled coffee on him to shut him up. Whisper to him, "You can thank me later." Mum comes in earlier that day and tells me she's helping her son plan his first date. She asked if I could help her make everything look really fancy and all the good stuff. I didn't have much to do that day, so I said, why not? I got everything ready for them. I held a great table with a great view of the ocean for them, chilled a bottle of apple cider by their table, got a dessert tray ready. It was fancy. Heck, I would have loved to go on that date. I kid you not, little Billy and Susie were staring at their cell phones the entire time. It was a dimly lit place, all you could see was the candlelight and their faces because of their phones. I was teed off. I'd been ready to give this kid a high five on the way out, to give him a "go get her, son." But no, I was ashamed instead. Oh, I also planned a proposal for this guy and all of their friends. He was supposed to do it on the beach before they came in, got cold feet and had to hide all of his friends. He texted us saying he'd do it on the table, got cold feet before dessert, and nothing. I was honestly feeding his friends all the bread we had in the place because we were waiting for them. Finally, he did it, she said yes, and we all cheered. Good times. Not a first date, but very awkward. A guy comes in with an escort and drops a good amount of money on booze at the bar. She then leaves a few hours later and he informs us that his wife is on her way to meet him for dinner and tips us an extra $200 to keep our mouths shut, keeping it classy. What was the most absurd, strict rule you had to live by growing up? My parents were horrible parents in general, but the most bizarre rule that my siblings and I put up with was that we weren't allowed to sneeze multiple times in a row. One sneeze? Fine. Another sneeze after some arbitrary number of minutes later? No problem. 2 sneezes in a row? Get yelled at for being unhygienic, even if you covered your mouth and nose properly, and for having no manners. God forbid if you sneezed thrice or more in a row. I have seasonal allergies, and one time my dad was in a particularly bad mood and caught me in a sneezing fit and grounded me for a week. I find it almost impossible to sneeze just once. After I open those floodgates, there's usually another 1 or 2 in the chamber ready to pop. I was grounded from the time I was 8 until I moved out. My stepmom would always find another reason to extend it, no matter how small. Even just my bookcase being messy, and at some point it just became normal that I wasn't allowed to do anything, and my dad didn't bother to fight it. And grounding for me didn't just mean I couldn't play video games. It was everything. I had no access to any kind of tech. She took away my alarm clock when she found out I was using the radio on it, and I couldn't go outside. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't be up past 8. Yes, even in summer when I was 17. I couldn't leave my room without a good reason, and I wasn't allowed to be in my sister's room or talk to her at all. I lost my real mum at 5, and my stepmom came into the picture within the year. I was still nowhere near recovering and felt like she was trying to replace my mum, so of course I wouldn't call her mum or anything like that. She and my father married when I was 7 without asking me or my sister. 3 at the time. My little sister was only 1 when my mum died and didn't feel bad letting our stepmom be mum. She didn't know anything else. She loved my sister and hated me, and I started doing worse and worse in school, giving my stepmom reason enough in my dad's eyes to keep me grounded that whole school year. It just never stopped after that. When I was still quite young, she found a cover to an adult movie DVD I'd found in the trash, and gave me a whack with her belt. My grandparents, mum's side, got pictures of the bruises, but were too afraid that my dad would move me across the country to do anything. It was enough that she was never physical again, but she just started making me write sentences after that. It started out, "I will not lie" 100 times, but that didn't keep me busy long enough, so she kept adding to it every time I did something she didn't like. The worst was when I was 14 and I ate some stevia packets from the top of the fridge and told her I didn't know where the empty packets came from out of fear. I will not lie, I will not steal, God hates a thief, and sin is death. 10,000 times. Due by the end of the month. In December. While I was writing them out, she came by my door, didn't say a word, and just set her belt on the doorknob. That was about as bad as it got, and honestly, I consider myself lucky it never got worse. I went to my grandparents' house every weekend, and they tried to spoil me as best they could. They weren't rich, but they loved me and gave me everything they could. I wouldn't be anywhere near the kind of person I am today without them, and so I'm thankful that they were part of my life. They taught me how a family is supposed to show love, since my mum couldn't, my stepmom wouldn't, and my dad didn't know how. Damn, that stepmother is practically following some step-by-step walkthrough on how to traumatize someone throughout their upbringing, and that was downright neglectful of your dad. Hope you did okay later in life. My mother would come home from work occasionally and say, "I know you did something you weren't supposed to. Go to your room. You have 15 minutes to think about what you want to say. If you lie, you'll get double punishment." I would freak out and say anything I thought might be bad I did during the day. I watched TV and I wasn't supposed to. I forgot my textbook at school. I made fun of a girl at school. I climbed a tree, among other things. She'd ground me for a week and I would feel relieved it wasn't worse. The messed up thing is that she had no idea what bad thing I did. She just knew I would confess to anything and everything. Being raised religious, I always thought I was sinning. So this was a way for her to control me and ground me so she was comfortable with where I was when she had night shifts. My mom once kicked me out of the house for being gay, and I'm not even gay. My mum wanted me to be gay. Once a friend and I got wet in the rain on the way home, and she asked if we were going to use the shower. Both. At the same time. She brought towels for both of us. She was extremely disappointed when I told her I got a girlfriend. If I tooted, I was forced to spend 2 hours outside, even in the freezing winter. One day, I collapsed in the cold and was taken away from my mum after I was hospitalized for 3 hours after collapsing. I then lived with my grandparents for the rest of my childhood, and legally wasn't allowed to see my mum until I was 18. I guess it counted as child endangerment. Something less serious, my mum was paranoid that everyone and everything was a kidnapper. She hated the mailman on our route, so when I was young, 3 or 4 years old, my mum told me it was illegal to be outside when the mail came. About 11:15 every day, I'd see that truck coming. I'd hightail it inside the house, terrified that I'd be spotted. Fast forward 30 years, I genuinely still feel a tinge of panic in the smallest recesses of the back of my brain when I see the mailman arrive. Only now it's overpowered by the excitement of my latest Amazon package that I don't really need. My time to shine. No nail polish, no tights under dresses. No drinking tea, not allowed to watch anything with any cursing. Had to call my parents sir and ma'am, and now they're upset that I call them this instead of mum and dad, by the way, but it's what they asked me to do. Bedtime of 9:30 until I was 18. Parents took my phone at 9 p.m. every night when I was in high school and read through all of my texts. They were allowed to open my bank statements. Not a rule, but my parents would read my diary and go through my computer, and once left video cameras up while I was hanging out with a friend and talking. They loved to repeat things I'd said or written to me, just to let me know that I had no privacy. In elementary school, my parents sat me down and said, "We just want you to know, if you get pregnant while living with us, we will kick you out." My parents gave my dog away while I was at school one day without telling me. I was 9. And these days, they wonder why I never want to share anything with them. Geez, this is all rubbish. My mom would read my diary too, but she never told me. She'd read it and then try to trick me into lying about something I wrote so she could punish me. I didn't know she was doing this for years. She convinced me that God told her what I'd done and led her to test me. My dad didn't snoop into my things that I know of, but he loved to accuse me of wanting to do the deed with my brother's friends, while he himself tried to get with my classmate. She was 15, he was in his 50s. Aren't parents the best? The only thing I can't figure out is your no tea rule. Why? Did they think it was poisonous? Or anti-American? If you're American, that is. Oh, and why no tights? I wasn't allowed to wear dresses without tights, lest someone see the bare flesh of my thighs. Huh? I wasn't allowed to swim in public swimming schools because I'd catch transmissible diseases from them, apparently. When my PE class would go to the pool 1 week a year, I had to walk laps around the pool because I couldn't participate. My stepdad typed up and printed a 5-page list of rules. He made me print, sign, and date the last page. I was to be held accountable, and if any rules were broken, I had to move out. I wasn't a bad kid. The whole thing was to establish his dominance of me. I wasn't allowed to leave my room. I couldn't go to the bathroom or kitchen, but I better have a reason to be there. So the narrator came to this story grouping mostly hoping for goofy rules about weirdos who are legally obligated to pledge fealty to the family cat every morning or something. Instead, we have the usual stories of conservative Christian repression and just downright imprisoning their kids. Sad stuff. Holding out for something goofier. I couldn't shave my legs until I was 16. I did when I was 12. My mum found out and grounded me. I had to ask to get a drink of anything or eat anything. I couldn't go anywhere unless my little brother could go with me too, or if he had a play date. If he didn't have anyone to play with, then I couldn't either. We were 8 years apart, by the way. Nobody in my house was allowed to get the mail except my dad. Doesn't matter what time he got home, leave the mail in the mailbox. He'd also personally open all the mail no matter the recipient. He'd always know if anyone touched it. To clarify, we aren't in piles of debt, I'm not Harry Potter, and I think he just likes control. My parents were super laid back, but my mother's stepdad Larry could be a huge butthole. She told me that one morning, as a kid, she was given a chocolate-covered donut, and, as a kid will do, decided to start nibbling off the chocolate. Larry decided this annoyed the crap out of him and asked her promptly to stop eating the donut like that. "Oh, just let her eat the donut how she wants," said Mum's mum, washing dishes. My mum continues to eat chocolate around the edges, and Larry shoots up, shouting, "Knock that off!" and fricking pitches his morning cup of coffee across the kitchen, where it explodes on the wall next to Mum's mum. I'm thankful that Larry was not in my mother's life for long. If you're out there, Larry, F you. As a kid, I loved to drink the milk out of the bowl after eating the cereal. One day I stayed over at a friend's house for a sleepover. In the morning I had some cereal and proceeded to drink directly from the bowl as I always had. I was told off and I thought, fine, drinking like that is a little rude, I'll just drink it by using the spoon, like you drink soup. I was told off for that too. I was like, what should I do with this milk? We don't like to waste food at my house, so it gets eaten or in the fridge, and the idea of just pouring it down the sink baffled me. I once got grounded for 2 months because my school bus was late. Backstory. I was 12 years old when this happened. A couple of kids almost got into a fistfight before the school bus left the parking lot, and the bus driver had to get the principal to break it up and escort them back into the school. The bus driver lectured us about fighting before driving us home. This caused us to be 30 minutes late. When I explained this to my mother, she blamed the whole situation on me, which was completely irrational because 1, I barely knew the kids who were involved, and 2, I was an introvert, bookworm type who never got into a fight. Oh, and 3, if I'd been in the fight, I would have been taken to the principal's office for punishment instead of being allowed to ride the bus home. She made a rule that I would be grounded every time the bus was late going forward regardless of the reasoning. I grew up in the northwest part of the US, so even when the bus driver had to drive home slowly because of snow, I would still get punished. Needless to say, I wasn't allowed out of the house much in middle school or high school. I once got grounded because I did the dishes without having to be reminded. My mum said that I was trying to manipulate her and that I must have only done it because I was trying to get something out of her. In reality, all I wanted out of her was to stop yelling at me about how I never do the dishes without having to be reminded. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. If you didn't instantly say what you wanted to eat, my father would cook onions and garlic. He didn't like people wasting his time. My grandmother made me write out the encyclopedia entry on witchcraft when she found out I'd read the first 4 Harry Potter books, if that counts. Oh no, my kid might learn witchcraft. Better have them copy an article on actual witchcraft. I had a stepdad who was a police officer, and all this occurred until I was 15. 1, I had to eat beans first on my plate and then clockwise. If I didn't follow this rule, I'd get no food and kicked from the dinner table. 2, I couldn't listen to Vanilla Ice because it was black music. 3, I had to stand in the corner with both feet on the floor and back straight for hours. 4, I had a time limit on hugging my mother. If we hugged too long, he called me gay slurs. 5, I had to get up in the morning and sit on the toilet and shine his leather while he showered. 6, I couldn't shut the door to go number 2. 7, I couldn't shut the door to shower or bathe. 8, if my bed squeaked at night, I'd get whipped because he thought I was whacking it. Oh yeah, there were more. I'm a mid-30s straight male and in a professional career. This happened from '84 to 1997 in southern US. This is just the surface stuff. I didn't even mention the stuff I knew was off growing up. He's retired on police pension, living off the state. He never had a single charge formally put in his jacket or his criminal record. Mum was definitely having a rough time of it too. No one in the house was allowed to shave or have a razor at all. I couldn't go to a barber or shave at a friend's house, but had my PC taken away when I tried at home. I still don't understand my mother's logic behind this one. I wasn't allowed to shave my legs. I guess my mom's thinking was that all the hair would serve as boy repellent. It wasn't necessary though, my personality was more than enough to keep me from getting laid. As much as some of the other stuff has surprised me, the repeated rule of no leg shaving across some of these posts is something I didn't even contemplate could happen. Fundamentalist religious people, treat your kids better. Your daughters shouldn't be your prisoners. My dad wrote contracts for me, including clauses like daily wake-up times, bedtimes, times to eat and what I ate, chores, homework, studying, and sports schedules, and strict rules and regulations regarding how I spent my free time, such as 30 minutes of computer use or video games, 1 hour of television, 1 sleepover per month, etc. If I didn't follow my schedule to the dot, missed sports practice or a game, failed to do a chore, or failed to get a 4.0 on every report card, I would be super grounded, as my friends referred to it. Basically, I had to read quietly in my room. I wasn't even allowed outside. I had to sign these contracts and commit to them, or I'd be sent to military school, which is where I spent every summer after 7th grade, taking classes anyways. As a result of these classes, I was a couple of grades ahead with math, English, and science. and was still expected to make perfect marks every semester. I was grounded virtually all the time, but luckily my parents had joint custody, and I escaped to my mother's house as much as possible. Also, mandatory substance testing from age 14 onward. Don't even get me started on what he would have done if he knew how much I smoked. I fought for sole custody to belong to my mother when he finally decided that, having caught me in the act with my girlfriend at the time, he was going to send me to a military academy 4 hours away. Nope, haven't spoken to him in almost 6 years. My dad was raised with the idea that kids essentially have no opinion, which he passed on to my sister and I. If we were doing anything and he or my mum needed us to do something else, we were expected to immediately drop it and go do the other thing, which doesn't sound that bad until I'd be in the middle of painting or something else messy and be called to do the dishes, then in the middle of the dishes be called to clean up the original mess, then to go clean that up and be yelled at for not finishing the dishes. And Lord help me if I said just a minute or anything like that. This sounds like a manager I had. Do tasks A, B, and C. I'll start task A. Why isn't C done yet? Drop A and start C. Why haven't you finished A yet? Go back to A. Wait, what about C? And why haven't you finished B yet? Stupid. Leave me alone and my job would take half the time. They were also fond of, well, why didn't you do X? When I'd tell her the extra tasks I did in downtime. Oh, you vacuumed, dusted, and washed the cabinets? Why didn't you clean the windows? My mom used to not allow me to watch any movies that had magic in them. Jumanji was considered demonic. I didn't even see The Little Mermaid until I was 16. I didn't watch The Princess and the Frog until I'd moved out. I was also banned from reading or watching Harry Potter. I managed to sneak that in at the age of 20. Mom never caught me and Dad didn't care. My dad wouldn't let me go out at all. The only time he'd let me leave the house was to walk to school, and even then, he had to walk me to the entrance. I was teased all the time. Due to my isolated upbringing, I'm very socially awkward, and he wonders why I won't go out and find myself a partner. He never raised my sisters that way, just me. He also wouldn't let me chew gum. He'd flip out. He's physically pried my mouth open to take the gum out. He's such a bizarre, controlling man. My mom didn't allow candy. Once I snagged a box of Valentine Hearts candy from preschool. Yes, I was about 4 or 5 and smuggled them home. Out of the goodness of my heart, I decided to share them with my undeservedly revered older brother. Said brother quickly decided that getting free candy was nowhere near as entertaining as me being punished and humiliated, and told my mom I was eating contraband candy. So, like any reasonable adult would do, she freaked out and pulled a Valentine heart out of my mouth while I was trying to eat it. Moral of the story? Never trust anyone. Could never have my door shut because, as a kid, I don't pay any bills, so I'm not running anything around here. My mum and I didn't get along and she did this count to 3 thing. I used to get in trouble for stuff I didn't do, so I got sent to my room a lot. I'd then refuse to go there, so she came up with this rule where she would add an extra hour every time I talked back after she got to 3. I ended up spending 8 hours in my room once because my sister lied about me doing something. My mum tried something similar with me. She told me I'd be grounded 1 day for every minute late I was home after curfew. It worked a couple of times when I was only a little late. One night I checked the time and was already 20 minutes late, so I just came home at 4:30 a.m. She didn't ground me for 270 days, thankfully. We came to a new, more reasonable agreement that morning. We had to drink a glass of lemon juice right before bed. Pure, freshly squeezed lemon juice. A whole glass. Timer went on for 10 minutes. If it went off and you weren't finished, whack on the butt. Set timer and repeat until the lemon juice was gone. I did okay, maybe 1 whack on the butt. But my sister has a terrible gag reflex, so she really got it bad. As you can imagine, being 5 and going to bed like that makes for some nasty heartburn and nausea. As a medical professional, do you get acid reflux nowadays? How about your siblings? Your parents might have caused GERD, which could lead to throat cancer. This is some pretty serious stuff. Go get your esophagus checked out. Unless your parents are waging some very poorly informed war on scurvy, I can't for the life of me find a reason why this rule would be a thing unless you just like watching your kids suffer, to be honest. After I turned 9 years old, I wasn't allowed to watch cartoons anymore because that's not what men did. I hated my dad for it. He was your typical dad that forces society's standard masculinity down my throat. I definitely rebelled and still watched cartoons. I'm 24 and still enjoy a good cartoon or anime. I was raised religious and my mum invented a concept called micro-sinning. So we had a rule where I had to be home by 11. If I made it home at 10:50, I was punished because it was too close to 11 and I was being defiant. Jesus died for our micro-sins. My parents were all over the place with strictness. When I was old enough to drive, my younger sister and I would drive to McDonald's, just a few miles away. My parents would admonish us, "Whatever you do, do not eat French fries in the car." Invariably, we'd get home, they would run out, open the doors, sniff, and start screaming at us for eating French fries in the car. We never did. When Nintendo, the original, first came out, my cousin got one for Christmas. We were poor, so he brought it over so we could try it out. Nope. The new rule became no video games hooked up to the TV because it would ruin the TV. FYI, they still believe this to be true and still only have one TV. Couldn't watch Disney movies as a child because they showed kissing before marriage. Wasn't allowed to go to friends' houses or let them give me a ride home from school because I'd be imposing on their parents. Mum went through my trash to make sure I didn't throw out anything important. The rule was that my mum had to pick out my friends because she didn't want me hanging out with anyone who wasn't Catholic or who was into satanic content. To my mum, everything was satanic. So basically, just about everyone I brought home was influenced by the devil because their parents let them listen to modern pop music and watch Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, mid to late 90s. Visiting their homes was strictly forbidden on account of the fact that the only opinions she wanted me to have were hers and hers only. It also didn't help when I wanted to play at the park with my friends and my mum would literally follow us and watch us the entire time. Eventually, no one wanted to be my friend anymore, and that was when the bullying began. This torture went on for 7 years. Then my mum wondered why I didn't have any friends and was bullied for such a long time. It was a miracle that I even had friends when high school came along. Needless to say, I'm not a Catholic anymore, and my mum and I are not on good terms. There was a crap ton of crazy rules living with my parents, mainly from my mum. My dad only followed to avoid arguments. But this rule was the one that affected me the most. What was the best gotcha moment that you've seen go down in court? A lady got into a minor fender bender with a truck in a casino parking lot. She backed out of a spot into him. My guy said she had parked and went inside the casino for a few hours. At her deposition, she testified that she was so hurt that she went right home and to a hospital. I asked if she was a frequent visitor of the casino and if she had a rewards card. She was happy to tell me that she did, and she had gold status, and showed me the card. I subpoenaed her rewards card records, and it showed she was playing slots for hours after the accident. My client's house burned down from an explosion in the fuel oil tank used to heat the house. It was clearly the oil maintenance company's fault, but his homeowner's insurance, from a very reputable company, still refused to pay out, citing a ridiculous technicality in his policy. Essentially, the policy covered damage caused by the oil heater, but they claimed that it was the storage tank that exploded and wasn't part of what was covered. So they deny his claim, which was about $1.2 million, and then I get involved. During a deposition with the claims adjuster, I ask how she came to the conclusion that the storage tank was not a part, or at least not connected to the heater. She states that she relied on her expert witness, who was an engineer. Little did she know I'd already checked this person's background. He had zero engineering experience or education. As most of you might know, you don't get attorney's fees in most cases. However, when an insurance company denies your claim in bad faith, now you do. Her little admission cost the company about $500,000 in fees, on top of the original claim for $1.2 million. Plaintiff had an X-ray of an allegedly broken arm. It seemed off to me and the dates didn't make sense. I was in-house at an academic medical center. I looked at the case more closely and discovered that the plaintiff was an X-ray tech at another hospital. After that, it was all over. I was trying to get a restraining order for a woman in DV court from her son's father. We were presenting testimony and she detailed a story where he grabbed her arm and slammed it on the tub, breaking her wrist. On cross, I asked the accused if he ever broke my client's wrist on purpose. His response, "Frick yeah, I did. She was 9 months pregnant and about to do smack and wouldn't stop. I tried to grab her arm to get the pipe and protect my unborn son." Frick me. She left that detail out in her conversations with me. Well, that's a moral conundrum that could be put in a philosophy course. Actually, no, just call the cops on your wife. Sucky situation anyway, though, all told. I had a former client file for bankruptcy, and in connection with that case, brought an action against his landlord for violating the automatic stay. In order to prove the damages, he wanted to show he paid my firm for legal fees in connection with the landlord's pursuit of rent in violation of the stay. So this former client's bankruptcy lawyer serves me a subpoena to show up at the bankruptcy hearing. He didn't ask me any questions prior, but just gave me the gist of what the objective was. In this case, to verify with the court the time I spent and the cost to his client. The bankruptcy attorney called his client, my former client, to the stand first. He asked him questions related to his hiring my firm to do this and that as it related to his landlord. Apparently, that's not enough. The bankruptcy attorney wants me to verify these facts as well. I get put on the stand and I was asked to verify the invoice. I first object to the question as a precaution, since it may be a violation of attorney-client privilege to answer the question, and to cover me for any claim by the bar or my former client. As predicted, the judge overrules and orders me to answer. I review the invoice and answer, "No, this is not my invoice." His attorney says, "I don't understand. This is your firm's logo and information, right?" "Yes." "And you provided these legal services, right?" "No." A very confused attorney slowly started to put together, after a couple more follow-up questions, that this idiot client of ours had manufactured my invoice to prove his damages. Needless to say, I could have given his new attorney the heads up, but I wasn't going to help someone who'd committed perjury to the court using my name. I'd represented him in a completely different matter, and this guy was trying to make some extra cash through his bankruptcy hearing. 2 lessons. Tell your attorneys everything, and as an attorney, make sure your client feels comfortable telling you everything. Cross-examining a custom home builder who had a lump sum contract, set price as opposed to cost plus, which means cost of the materials plus the builder's fee, with the homeowner. Claimed he put 20% more labor and materials into building the home than the contract had provided for, and he was suing for those excess costs. I was asking him about an email with my client negotiating the price of the construction, and he volunteers that he knew he couldn't build it for that price. My head snaps up. Supervising partner's head snaps up and the opposing counsel goes pale. Dialogue was something like, "You quoted this price?" And the builder said, "Yes." "And you knew you couldn't build it for that price?" The builder said, "Yes." "You knew the homeowner was relying on that quote?" "Yes." "You knew the homeowner wouldn't have signed the contract without that representation?" "Yes." "And you told homeowner's lender that you could do it for this amount?" "Yes." "And the bank relied on that price and wouldn't have given loan if they knew it was wrong?" "Yes." This is textbook fraudulent inducement and he had no idea. Builder got poured out in the arbitration award and slapped the builder with a sizable punitive damages on top of it. 5 minutes of testimony sunk his case because he volunteered information without being prompted. The plaintiff alleged he was so injured in an auto accident that he couldn't work or do any regular activities or pick up his young kids. He then posted on his public Facebook profile him doing the ice bucket challenge. If you're not familiar, he basically lifted a huge cooler filled with ice water over his head. His attorney had no idea that he'd posted it. "I once heard about a man who got a doctor to do him a report for his compo claim. Can't bend, can't lift, can't run, etc. Problem was he had a paternity suit ongoing at the same time. Got the same doctor to write a report for that case. No restrictions on mobility, can pick up kid, play with him, etc. As you can guess, he and the doctor got caught. Recent and pretty good, I represented a guy whose car died in the middle of the freeway at 4 a.m. He put his hazard lights on and called 911 for help. At the same time, an LAPD cop heading to work around the same time in a police unmarked car was driving around 87 to 92 miles per hour. Per our deconstructionist, he didn't see our guy and strikes him, causing a major 6-car collision, including overturning an 18-wheeler truck. The police arrive and take photos. The LAPD officer claimed our guy didn't have his hazard lights on, and he was only driving 60 miles per hour. He was trying to put some of the fault on our guy. At the deposition of the investigating officer, she doesn't remember if our guy's hazard lights were on or not. The attorney brings him photos of the scene. One of the photos showed my guy's hazard lights on. We were dismissed shortly thereafter. Not so much a gotcha as it is the defendant giving themselves up. When I worked for insurance defense, I handled a fraud case where a man reported his Rolex as being stolen. He was so adamant that he was at a hotel and it was stolen. He's shown no proof of being in a hotel, so it's flagged. We go through the whole process and finally reached depositions. He gets sworn in and eventually left out that he wasn't at a hotel, but rather with his mistress and had left it at her house. His wife noticed he didn't have it on, so he immediately claims it was stolen. Yeah, right. This man decided to hire an attorney and go through this whole circus just so his wife wouldn't find out about his affair. Needless to say, the claim was denied. I mean, the fellow in question is a gigantic sack of crap, but I guess if he wants to save what's left of his marriage, that's clearly failing by his own fault. Go ahead. Lying always works, right? When I was in the military, I was accused of something I didn't do, and I had to go to court over it. And during court, the prosecutor started to detail this investigation and how they'd staked my apartment out for months. They entered into evidence a picture of my apartment, and when they put it up, I looked shocked at my lawyer because it wasn't a picture of my place. It was my ex-wife's apartment, a place I'd never lived, never spent a single night there. I lived in a house, she lived in an apartment. And when my lawyer asked if she objected to the picture being entered into evidence, she replied, "I don't mind them entering it into evidence as long as they change the listing of it." And when one of the members of the panel, no judge, 3 members board, asked what was wrong with the listing, she looked at him and said, "That's not his apartment." On top of this, the witness they used against me described going to my house on the night in question, and she named the subdivision where she'd visited me, except that wasn't where I lived either. Also wasn't where the picture they had was either. The case was dismissed and I was told they requested the witness to return to answer questions about perjury. I lived with a guy when we were in our early 20s. He worked for one of those crappy furniture rental places where people without money get furniture. Much of his job was repossessing furniture, and in his spare time he was a skateboarder. He severely hurt his back on the job and they were contesting paying his bills and settling. At one of his mediation dates, they revealed they'd hired a private investigator to follow him. They showed him pictures of himself at a skate park skating when he was supposed to be home recovering. They asked him to verify it was him. He said no. These doofuses had somehow missed that he had a twin brother who also skated. They eventually settled for what I thought was a very low $70,000. He had back pain for years that caused him to gain weight and suffer. In his 30s, he finally had back surgery and he regretted not doing it 10 years earlier. He said it completely alleviated the pain. I had a client accused of leading the cops on a high-speed chase. The cop on the stand estimated he was going 90 miles per hour but never actually clocked him. Then the cop identified where the chase started with me and where it ended. It lasted about 2 miles. Then we went through his log of when it started and when it ended. About 3.5 minutes. Once you walk through the math on that, the average speed of this chase was 35 miles per hour. The client got acquitted really quickly after that. A friend of mine got pulled over once. I was in the car with him. When the cop approached us, he said, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I had to go 70 to catch up. My only thought was, how does that matter? It's not like he'd catch up by matching our speed. I'm still confused by that interaction. It sounds like police officers don't know what relative velocity is. The first case I ever did, opposing counsel misplaced the copy of my client's driver's license. Rather than admitting his mistake and asking me to resend it, he filed a motion to compel, claiming we never sent it. Well, I was able to provide proof that we'd sent it to him like 8 months ago, so the judge was rather displeased with his antics. The judge was rather displeased with his antics? Not a lawyer, but this tends to be my impression with judges who catch people doing shady stuff. I remember once, during undergrad, being an intern with a probation office and the case ahead of our revocation hearing had a guy pleading guilty. During his rambling and disjointed allocation, the judge frowned. "So why are you pleading guilty exactly?" And the guy replied, "My lawyer told me to." The judge was most displeased when he questioned the guy further and found out the guy had no concept of what he was doing or what the potential sentencing could be. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Represented a DUI client who swore up and down to me that he hadn't been drinking or doing any substances. A newbie officer who had his field training officer with him in the car. The rookie pulls the client over for a tag violation, walks back to the car with the body camera still on, and the training officer, FTO, says to him, "Get him out for a DUI," and the rookie says, "But he's not intoxicated." To which the reply was, "Do it anyway." The body cam clicks off, turns on 7 minutes later when they're doing field sobriety exercises on my client. The client sat in custody for 3 weeks until I finally got the tape from the prosecutor and presented it to the judge. The "oh crap" looks from the prosecutor and field training officer when the judge saw the tape, I'll treasure those. The judge wrote the police chief a letter saying the field training officer was dead to him and he'd deny every search warrant he tried to bring thereafter for being a liar. The client is hopefully still on track with his civil attorney in a lawsuit. I was suing a landlord who failed to make serious repairs in order to force the tenant out. The hard part is proving bad intent instead of mere idiocy, so you get higher damages. Code enforcement was involved, so I request those records. The landlord left a voicemail to the enforcement department saying to hold off on the fines. They'll make the repairs as soon as the tenant is forced out. That was an easy case. Some crap like this happened to my dad. The landlord refused to make repairs, the washer was busted, garbage disposal was leaking, and forced floorboards to warp. My dad moved and wanted his deposit. They wouldn't give it to him. He took them to court. He took pictures before he left and kept all texts from them. They walked themselves into a corner with everything they said. My dad was prepared for every claim. Eventually, the judge told my dad he could fight it until the end and get his whole deposit, or the landlord could give most of it now and it would be over. He took the deal because he didn't have time for court, and the look of anger and defeat on the landlord's face was too satisfying. I had a client whose $60,000 car was ruined by a shop that put in the wrong oil. We couldn't prove it at first. The engine blew up and oil leaked out and evidence was lost. I subpoenaed their bank records. I figured out they brought their oil from Costco. Called Costco and got their prices list for the last 2 years. I worked out the amounts they were spending, did some backhand math, and showed, based on the values, it was impossible they ever bought the correct oil. They settled in full immediately. This is just satisfying. Not a massive slip-up on the defendant's behalf like a lot of these others, just a good bit of clever sleuthing and voila, the magician has turned a "this didn't happen" into a "we admit everything." Chef's kiss. Worked as a paralegal and investigator. Working a trade secrets case involving the manufacturer of dental wheels used to grind teeth. Long story, but go with it. Company A was a small family-owned manufacturer, but made the best product on the market from a small factory in the middle of nowhere. Sold massive amounts of product because of quality. Its location was remote enough and the owner paid employees so well the employees stayed there. Forever. All of them had worked there for more than 30 years. When the founder of the company died, it was sold to International Company B because the kids and grandkids had no interest in the company. Company B then closed the old factory and tried to use Company A's formula at their facilities. Company B couldn't make the formula work. Now, enter Company C, another international company who lost the bid on buying Company A. When Company C heard about the problems Company B was having, they brought the old factory facilities and then rehired the old staff to restart production. All the employees of old Company A were delighted to have their good-paying jobs back and went straight to work, producing the better quality items once again, and Company C's product worked. Company B sues Company C for trade secrets violation. When you buy a company, you buy their trade secrets, and this company had a bunch. The product was just one part, but the most profitable part of their operation. Thus, Company C, because of their action, was accused of violating the laws governing trade secrets. Company B even managed to get a temporary restraining order against Company C in federal court, and Company C had to stop manufacturing at the old plant they now owned. This is when I enter the picture. Our firm represented Company C, and I was assigned to interview all of the employees. I was in the living room of this delightful older lady in her late 50s that offered me snacks and asked me if I was married and wanted to set me up with her granddaughter, you name it. Best and funniest interview ever. Then she drops the bomb. I asked her how she knew how to make the product. All my previous interviews said so, and so taught them. She said, "From the directions on the wall." Total moment of silence. Directions on the wall? "Yes," she said. "No one ever looks at them, but there's a board on the wall with the directions." I called the janitor of the facility from her phone, this is before cell phones, and had him meet me there. He unlocks the place and covered in probably 40 years of dust, making it just part of the background, is a board with the entire process on it. Thus, when Company B sold the factory, which was eventually purchased by Company C, Company B accidentally sold the trade secrets to Company C because they abandoned it on the wall. I did serious evidence sourcing on this. My best pictures were of this 65 or older former janitor knocking the dust off the pages, taking the entire board off the wall, putting it in a paper bag and sealing it so I never touched it. Every picture he smiled for the camera. His "frick you" expression was priceless in every picture. They were so fricking funny. The judge in federal court was laughing his butt off when he heard the details of what I found to reverse the restraining order. When he opened the bag, he laughed even more. The factory reopened immediately. Company B and C settled by agreeing that they both got to use the trade secret, but couldn't sell it to anyone else. What they really figured out was those little old ladies had slightly changed the formula over the years and made them slightly better over time. Even the formula on the wall didn't work as well as those little ladies did. My brother is an attorney. He had a case where the guy said he was permanently disabled from a work accident. At a deposition, my brother overheard the guy talking about getting his house remodeled. He was already spending the money he thought he was getting. My brother drove by the house to see how much work was being done and saw the guy carrying bundles of roofing shingles up a ladder to the roof. This was before smartphones, so he drove to a Best Buy and brought a video camera, went back and recorded the guy. He had copies made and sent it to the other attorney. The guy dropped the suit and went back to work the following Monday. My brother's client didn't want to pay for the video camera. It saved them thousands of dollars. They eventually paid, but he still gets a little teed off when he talks about it. I'm amazed the initial guy's company even took him back after he tried to pull that stunt. Certainly wouldn't have helped his chances at future claims. Sucks to suck, although clearly his bosses sucked a bit too. Legal videographer. This gentleman was claiming injuries and seeking damages against his employer after a fall at work. He claimed he couldn't raise his right arm above his shoulder because of the fall. First deposition comes along and I'm hired by defendant's attorney to videotape deposition of the plaintiff. Anyone know the first thing a court reporter asks you to do in a deposition? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. The plaintiff raises his right arm above his shoulder with ease and no sign of discomfort. It doesn't occur to him what he's done. Both attorneys were looking down at their notes when this happened and neither of them caught it. The plaintiff himself didn't catch it. The court reporter looked at him and then looked at me, and her eyes went wide with realization at what had just happened. 4 hours of depositions proceed where the plaintiff is instructed, multiple times, to show his range of motion and proceeds to pretend like he can't raise his arm above the shoulder level, which he did at the very beginning of this deposition. Deposition ends, plaintiff's counsel leaves, I call defense, the hiring party counsels over, and show them the first 2 minutes of the tape. The counsel excitedly whispers to me, "Case closed. You've just saved us tens of thousands of dollars." I got a $5,000 bonus and the plaintiff's case was dismissed with prejudice. This is so petty. I've had much bigger moments, but because of the character of the other side, this will always be my favorite. Doing a boundary dispute, a squabble over what was essentially a few inches of land. The other side was a lawyer and an absolute butt. He was acting for himself. The whole, a lawyer who acts for himself has a fool for a client thing was bang on for him, but he was a deeply unpleasant guy, a bully who thought that he was the smartest guy in the room. Part of his case hinged on wheelie bins and how prior to the boundary having been moved, there wasn't space to store a full-sized bin beside the house. The fact that you now could meant clearly the boundary must have moved. That was the extent of his evidence. It was really thin stuff. During the actual trial, he pulled a fast one by suddenly producing an old aerial photo, ostensibly to show the boundary at the front of the property had also moved. A fast one because you have to disclose stuff like that in advance, you can't just sit on something relevant and then suddenly whip it out at a trial with a flourish. While he was making his submissions that it should be admissible, I looked more closely at it, away from the bit of the boundary he said it was relevant to, and realized that it very clearly showed a wheelie bin in exactly the spot his case said there couldn't be one. Told the judge we were happy for the photo to be admitted after all, and got the other side to confirm the date it was taken, and then pointed out he'd just completely messed up his own case. That photo did him for nearly $50,000 in adverse costs. Couldn't happen to a more deserving chap. My client was a woman working at a meatpacking plant. Her glove, they'd only give her the loose kind because they were cheaper, got caught in the machine and she lost her arm. We sued the owners of the plant for the glove issue. We also sued the machine manufacturer for failing to include the required guard. Then we sued the distributor for being in the chain of the sale, but didn't really think they played that much of a role. The manufacturer swore that they included a handguard and said the plant owner must have used a grinder to take it off. During a deposition of the guy that owned the distributing company, he shows up with the sale documents he was supposed to have turned over weeks before. Turns out there was a note in the small print at the bottom he didn't know about that said the sale was without the handguard, which is against the law. I pointed it out and we ended up settling that afternoon with the distributor. The woman got all her medical bills paid, got money for a prosthetic, and got a bunch of pain and suffering damages. How do cops tell the guilty people apart from the ones who are just nervous? I knew a police helicopter pilot and I asked a similar question when searching for suspects. He said that the bad guys were the ones not looking up at the helicopter. Innocent people point, look, and stare. I thought it was funny, but true to a point. I was taking the bins out one dark night and there was a police helicopter nearby. All of a sudden, they lit me up with the spotlight. I was like a deer in the headlights, and after a second or two, slowly waved at them, and then after a few more seconds, the spotlight moved on elsewhere. It was so awkward, they must have been peeing themselves laughing. Pulled over for being lost in the wrong neighborhood. Was relieved as I didn't have GPS at the time and was horribly lost. I'd been hoping that the cop who'd been tailing me for the last mile would pull me over to get directions. They wanted to know why a white boy like me was in a neighborhood like this. I explained that I'm lost. Doesn't believe me. Says I'm here for substances. My whole attitude changed because I was suddenly nervous. Why would he think that? And realizing that this could go badly. He says only guilty people act nervous. He ends up calling a K9 unit to search my car. The other cop is really cool. We chat and he apologized for the first cop being a jerk. After search, he gives me directions on how to get to my destination. Good cop, bad cop is real. I got pulled over for speeding on Canada Day, on my way up to Ottawa from Toronto. Did the usual routine of pulling over somewhere safe, taking the registration out and putting both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. The cop approaches and I ask if it's okay for me to reach over and turn down the music, which I forgot to do. He starts laughing and says okay. He tells me to put my hands down since I'm making him nervous. I'm like, you're making me nervous. Back in Toronto, I don't take chances, and the cops are usually appreciative. But they've never told me to relax. It's best to err on the side of caution with Toronto police. But out of the city, cops are usually pretty laid back. We had a good old Canadian laugh, wished each other a happy Canada Day, and then he gave me a ticket for 115 in a 100. The funny thing is, I'm an off-duty cop, and around a uniformed officer I don't know, different department or area, I get nervous. Hell, my heart sometimes skips a beat when I see one of our own cars driving down the road, even though it might be the exact same vehicle I was assigned to just a few hours ago. My point is, I think pretty much everyone gets nervous around cops. Most people will avoid you and not make eye contact. But what really stands out for me are the adults that will periodically look at you, or you feel them staring at you like they're trying to ID your face. I've had to arrest a lot of people over the years, and many of them are back out on the streets. Perhaps as a cop, he's aware of how poorly things can go. I don't think literally everyone gets nervous around cops. The narrator has never had that healthy fear. Maybe one day when I'm wrongfully victimized, that will change. UK police officer here. There's no single factor, but there's a few things I'd look out for. Police aware is an expression we use. Like the last guy said, most people feel guilty and try to act normal around the police, which normally means pretending we're not there. You can begin to concentrate on eating that sandwich to an almost comic extent while sneaking the odd look to see what the copper's doing. Then you have the people who stop what they're doing and watch you intensely to see if you're coming for them. These are the people who are police aware. Of course, sometimes they're just tourists hoping to take a sneaky photo of a British copper. Mostly it's people whose appearance or manner doesn't fit in. For example, if you go to a busy taxi rank at a rush hour and then just casually mooch about rather than queuing or leaving, then that's an odd thing to do. If you walk into an expensive shop wearing tatty clothes and with ingrained dirt on your hands, then that's an odd thing to do. If you walk into a bar, order a drink, then leave it on the counter, then that's odd as well. And probably means you're either passing counterfeit money or pickpocketing. None of these things is illegal, but they're all things that are not entirely normal and would attract the eyes of an observant police officer. Don't misinterpret these examples as looking scruffy. That's not what I mean at all. It's about not fitting in because of your context, not just a sudden bout of, I'm normal, from someone who clearly has a reason to be where they are. Visible signs of substance use. Sometimes in the UK you'll hear the term smack diet, but the same would be true for crystal in the US. You can spot addicts from a mile away, because they have the same look and behaviors. Without wishing to tar all addicts with the same brush, hard substance addiction and acquisitive crime often go hand in hand. So when I see someone who's clearly an addict, I'm immediately interested in them. Lastly, there's intelligence. A lot of what we do is guided by specific knowledge about an area. In some areas, I'll be looking out for teenage kids hanging around bike racks. In others, I'll be looking out for substance addicts meeting dealers. In others, I'll still be looking for bag thieves amongst drinkers. Anyone who matches the sort of person who I'm on the lookout for, who also gets jumpy, is going to pique my interest. But normal people, less so. Sorry it's such a rambling answer, the truth is there are many factors and it just depends. A good friend of mine works as a lawyer for one of the bigger insurer companies in defense. A good percentage of accidents happen because people freak out about the mere presence of the cop and don't focus on the actual driving. Like literally during a deposition, I didn't see them pull out, there was a cop on the same road. In medicine, we have a similar phenomenon called white coat hypertension. Being in the mere presence of a doctor raises patients' blood pressure. So a patient may have a normal blood pressure, but every time they step into the office to get it checked, it goes up. Going to the doctor can be bad for your health sometimes. I'm one of these jumpy people. I've been pulled over and screamed at, "Why are you so nervous? What are you hiding?" And another time, the cop was very nice and just said, "Relax, it's just a ticket. Are you okay? Do you want to catch your breath? It's not a big deal. Take a couple of deep breaths, buddy." Super friendly and helps me relax. I get anxiety in those situations without any real cause. I just get really nervous. It's crazy how differently cops can handle the situation in the exact same circumstances. Just one was nicer, or trained better. I've only had one bad instance with a cop who was convinced I was up to no good. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him. He asked me why I took a specific exit before my destination, and I mentioned I needed gas. He said, "Well, you've got an answer for everything, don't you?" Yes, sir, it's not that difficult when it's the truth. He ended up having me wait outside the car for half an hour while he went over it with a canine unit after I refused to let him search. I didn't want to have to reorganize everything after he rummaged through it. I had nothing to hide. Then when the dog found nothing, he searched the car anyway because I seemed nervous because I was sweating, after standing in the Texas sun in August for 30 minutes. I filed a complaint and was pretty much told, "Too bad, our officers are risking our lives for you every day, and people shouldn't be questioning their authority." Cop here. Assuming this is on a traffic stop, for the most part, if you're acting jumpy, I try to figure out why and remove that stress. If I can't figure it out on my own, I'll simply ask. Common answers are, I don't like cops, I don't want a ticket, and so on. My reasoning for this is if you're relaxed and I ask if there are any weapons in the car and your stress indicators skyrocket when you say no, something's wrong. If you're already stressed, I won't be able to see that reaction. As others have stated, it's not 100%, some people are just nervous Nellies. I try to calm people down for their sanity and my safety, but it doesn't always work. I have anxiety. Every time a copper pulls me over, I look guilty. But really, I'm scared of unwarranted police violence and nervous about how much money today's ticket will cost me. Police always notice and they always say that makes me suspicious, so they have reason to ask to search me and my possessions. I feel like I can't be the only innocent person in the world who gets the jumps around police, but they always act like I'm the first person they've ever encountered who acts guilty when I haven't actually done anything. Every time I get pulled over, as soon as my tag is run through the system, the police get on their bullhorn and tell me to get out and lay on the ground. Not because I'm black, because I'm a two-time convicted felon, been crime-free for 6 years. But I always find it amusing, and after all the foolishness, I always have a laugh with them. Duval, Florida, by the way. Well, your attitude to it is bafflingly positive. I can't imagine many people would react that positively to what you make sound like a semi-regular public spectacle of yourself. Police instructor here. You look for what is out of place or context. Everyone is looking at an event or certain direction, and that one person is staring at you or in the complete opposite direction. That's the oddball. People draw attention to themselves by behavior that is different from the environment, or expected of the environment they're in. It's how they identified the Boston bombers. Everyone was looking in the direction of the explosion, but the brothers were staring in the opposite direction. Suspicious behavior. This technique can be applied to clothing as well. If it's summer and you see people wearing heavy jackets, there's something odd. Somebody keeps tapping the waistline and there's no reason for him to do that, like something falling off it, and there's something tucked into their waistline, like substances or weapons. Now, not saying this gives you an excuse to go up and start frisking people, however, it definitely lets you narrow down the focus of your attention for what is out of place. Cops once woke me up at 3 a.m. in the morning because my neighbor saw flashlights in the woods next to my house. Then they started questioning me, asking why I seemed so nervous, and if I wasn't doing anything, why were there footprints in the snow in front of my fricking front door? I was a 19-year-old living on my own in a small town, so small it didn't have a population. I just remember being absolutely flabbergasted at why they'd want to know why someone might be nervous from getting a visit from the cops in the middle of the night, and why they thought footprints in a heavily traveled area was suspicious. I basically told them some variation of that and then told them they were welcome to look around outside if they wanted before they left. This was during deer hunting season in Wisconsin, so the only thing I could think of is that maybe they thought there was some poaching going on. Still, it showed a remarkable detachment from reality that they couldn't understand why I was so nervous to begin with. I had a similar incident. Dead asleep, woken up by police pounding on the door. This is before cell phones, so naturally, my now ex-husband and I woke up and ran downstairs. Cue the police shining a light in our faces, and the first thing they said was, "Oh, let me guess, you just woke up. How convenient." So the ex and I were like, yeah, we did. What's going on? The cop says our car was involved in a hit and run of several cars. A friend of ours was staying over a few nights. We motioned behind us to the couch where he was sleeping to the cops, who come in. Dude is in his shoes and yet he's sweating. So, yeah. Thanks for assuming, dudes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Actual police officer here. There really is no magic answer. There's a ton of overlap between both groups, and anyone who says they can consistently spot the difference is lying to you. I'd rather judge the situation based on the objective facts rather than my gut feeling. Not long after I got my license, I was driving around, and at a stoplight there was a cop behind me. I hadn't done anything wrong. Cops at that point didn't freak me out yet, and I even knew a kid in school who was planning to become one. The lights turn green, and I go. I notice behind me everyone is behind the cop on all lanes. It weirded me out. Usually, there are cars passing me or next to me. People were giving the cop a nice wide berth, or at least not wanting to drive ahead of it. It made me feel paranoid and I checked my speed. I was actually going slower than the speed limit. After I figured out everyone was just being paranoid, I sped up to the speed limit, and that was that. The cop was driving slower than the speed limit, and I drove off, leaving them all behind. I feel like the cop probably thought it was hilarious that his presence was slowing down traffic, because it wasn't like he was trying to control it, his lights weren't on. Since then, I've had plenty of speeding tickets. Plenty. But not on that day. Cops freak me out now too. Every time I see one, I go, oh crap, speed limit? I'm okay. Car functioning right? Yes. Substances in the car? Wait, no, don't do substances. It's a tense situation. Not a cop, but having worked in a pawn shop, I'll say they talk way too much. When the customer was trying to pull something on us, most would talk a lot about nothing, keep up a constant stream of chatter. Of course, this is in no way a 100% indicator, but it was one sign we looked for. Liars will usually offer additional explanations and excuses for something even when you don't ask, mostly because they assume you'll doubt what they'll say and feel the need to back up their claims. Just imagine that a friend is late and he says, "Oh, sorry, I forgot," and move on. That's probably true because he didn't even consider for a moment you might doubt that. That same friend shows up late but then starts explaining in detail why they're late and add more and more details to that story even though you didn't ask. They might be making crap up and trying to present a more finite, flawless story. And of course, this only applies to bad liars. Duh, of course. Tips for spotting obvious liars only apply to people who didn't perfect the art. Not a cop, but I'm a Florida native and am usually dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. I was in a flyover state for a concert and was supposed to pick someone up about 4 hours away in the morning. Instead of getting a hotel for 5 hours, I decided to drive to my destination and sleep in the back of the rental car. Usually when I do this, I roll the windows down and sleep with the car off, but it was in the mid-30s this night. I pull into the vacant parking lot next to a vacant building outside of town. Turns out I was still in city limits. I tried to turn the lights off but wasn't able to. This eventually attracted the attention of the local law enforcement. I woke to a flashlight banging on my window. They, all 9 of them, wanted me out of the car while they tried to figure out what was going on. Being as it was cold, I started to shake. I shared how I thought it was amusing that I was shaking and that it would likely raise suspicion. The cop that was babysitting me at that moment said, "No, it's cold out." She then let me get into the car and started again. 9 out of 10 would recommend. I got pulled over for a DUI stop at 2:30 in the morning in the middle of March. I was just leaving work, so I didn't really have a proper attire to be standing outside for long periods of time. I'd not been drinking and showed no evidence of it at all. I got pulled over for swerving when I went to reach for my water bottle that fell on the floor, but the cop proceeded to keep me outside of my car, doing all of the sobriety tests for about an hour while I was shivering and my teeth were chattering. It was close to 3:30 when he finally realized I wasn't impaired. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Thank you both for your respective ratings. They were very helpful in working out whether you did or did not enjoy your respective inconveniences. 8 out of 10 would read again. There's a bit in Bryan Cranston's book where he talks about his time as a security guard. His talent was spotting about-to-be shoplifters. His advice? People come into stores because they want something specific. In and out. Watch for the lingerers. Must be rough around Christmas time. Sorry, security guards, I have no clue what to get my mom. UK veteran and ex-Metropolitan Police, here, just found it's all down to experience when reading people. Your mentor is everything and should be a wealth of knowledge. Learn from them. Also, the weirdos tend to be regulars, and someone will know them and tell you all you need to know. The regulars will be in an Intel database somewhere, so any safety issues should be made aware of for you to control. This includes known aliases. I don't put much consideration on someone's nervousness to the likeliness of them committing a crime. We need reasons or probable cause to determine that. However, someone's jumpiness is a tactical cue to me that they may more likely run or fight, especially if I already have probable cause of a crime occurring. Most people are more scared when stopped by the police, but this fear is different than jumpiness. Fear is a little more subdued than the tension of someone looking for an escape. Another consideration is that if someone suffers from a mental illness, their symptoms are usually clearly different than someone who is plain scared or jumpy. Also, someone who is affected by substances clearly has distinct signs. It's pretty complicated to explain, but simple when observing it in person every day. Ex-cop, still licensed if that matters. You can't always tell. That's why treating everyone as close to the same as possible is important. The average person will change their behavior around a police officer at least a little bit. It can be weird, over-respectful type deal, or they might shut down completely. The average criminal acts nearly the same. However, that's why it's important to be very aware of the person's movements and responses to questions or your own movements. If you ask a person with substances in the car, "Do you have substances in the car?" his eyes will very commonly dart toward where he or she is hiding something, even if it's not substances. That, of course, doesn't give me probable cause to tear their car apart looking for stuff. It's just a red flag. A person who is simply nervous and is not really guilty of a crime will most likely just break eye contact and look somewhere else, such as out of the window, behind you, down at the wheel, among a few other places. Same goes for a person you may simply be suspicious of on the street. Are you carrying any weapons? Will lead to a person carrying a weapon to often touch the area where it is, usually repeatedly, or start to look at where they have hidden a weapon. A person who's just nervous probably won't grab their waistband several times after that question. That is just one example, but it shows the importance of communication. Being aware of the surroundings and subject, and why asking questions is very important. All because a person who's simply nervous and a criminal who is nervous are almost indistinguishable without some digging. As for people who appear totally 100% calm, well, that in and of itself can be a red flag as well. Maybe he or she is calm because they like police. Maybe they are police in a different area. Maybe they really have nothing to hide and a good understanding of police procedures. Or they're a hardened criminal that has no sense of remorse or anxiety over meeting a cop. You never know unless you start to look deeper. So to anyone who feels like cops hate you or are mean, maybe that sheds a bit of light on things. I'm a cop in Arizona. It's important to know the cultural and societal norms of your patrol area. A huge amount of folks are packing heat here, for example. Your average law-abiding citizen will generally use a holster and not be deceptive about the weapon. Bad guys will not be forthcoming. We have some issues with Mexican cartels, and they tend to blend in somewhat, but have weapons in unique calibers, such as .38 Supers. Since we do have a huge Hispanic community, it helps to know the norms of their behavior, which differ somewhat from the white community. A vast majority of the time we'll be dealing with people while investigating specific crimes. There's a huge variety of factors involved in that, but generally speaking, you're going to use 4 of your senses to make educated guesses: sight, smell, touch, and sound. A person whose voice wavers may just be afraid of cops. Combine that with an odor of substances, or a suspicious protrusion on their body, then there could be an issue. White cultural knowledge is important. There are some universal signs of deception, which you could probably recognize. I spent a year in Afghanistan doing police work as well, and those principles held true there too. To a degree, it's profiling, which is a dirty word but a pragmatic principle. I never feel I act normal around cops. Funny thing is, I have 2 close relatives who are cops. When I act normal around them, they tell me I should respect that they're cops. Sorry, does this illegal activity that we're both participating in bother you all of a sudden? I got a family member who's been a cop since the 80s, basically the Stone Age. He gets nervous when the cops are behind him. Cops can't even tell if they're in the right house. Smart people rarely become cops. In fact, I've known people who failed the entrance tests for getting too high a score. You shoot them all and let God sort them out. Seriously though, my uncle is a sheriff and he said one of the biggest giveaways is people who try to be subtle, but their actions are completely different from someone who has nothing to hide. For example, if they're busting up a party, an underage drinker will nearly immediately set their drink down and push it away about 6 inches after they set it down. The pushing away isn't something you normally do. Everyone is different, but usually the nervous people will be polite and apologetic. Suspicious people will be more agitated and annoyed. Young black man here. I was approached by an officer at a bus stop because of my suspicious behavior. Among 7 other people, I was the only black. I was nervous looking at my watch and in the direction of the bus that I wanted to come through because I was late for work, which was the direction where the cop came from. By the looks of it, probably thought that I was nervous because of his presence. The cop got jumpy, hand on his holster, and forced me to show my ID and backpack for suspicious or things that would compromise me. Didn't even bother to see that the other commuters were talking about the late bus out loud. What's the most messed up thing that you've eavesdropped? I was a kid, maybe 10-ish, and I was homesick from school one day. My dad left my door ajar to hear me in case I started hurling. He thought I was asleep, but I could hear him talking to his best male friend at the time, out in our family room. Dad's friend was telling him about how he cheated on his wife and how good it was. And he asked my dad if he ever cheated on my mum. Even at that age, I knew it was wrong, and my heart raced as I listened for his answer. To this day, I'm in my 30s, I'm very proud of my dad for saying, "No, I had a chance to. My brother's wife put her hand between my legs, but I shoved her away. You know I love my mum's name. I never did tell anyone about that. My parents are still together." First off, I wear hearing aids. When I was in elementary school, I had a mic that was on a necklace and my teacher would wear it. It would transmit to my hearing aid. Anyway, she was talking about her weekend out drinking and sleeping with strangers. It was worse when she realized that she'd left the mic on. This is some sitcom level crap. My daughter is hearing impaired. Similar thing happened to her, except the teacher was talking to another teacher about Christmas presents for her daughter. Same age as mine. When her teacher returned to the classroom, my daughter whispered in her ear, "I think she'll like that." When I was a little kid, like 5 years old, I really wanted this stupid stamp set in the Family Dollar. My mum and I walked in there for her to buy tampons. We found both in the clearance bin. I overheard her talking to the lady at the cash register when price-checking the items about how she only had money for one of the items and that she was going to buy me the stamp set over the tampons that she needed. I'm 21 now and I never told my mum that I heard that. She always pretended that we had enough money, but she would skip meals or give up her stuff to make sure we had enough. And it breaks my heart to think about it. I know it's not super messed up, but still. My husband and I were at McDonald's. We took our son to the play place to try and let him burn off some energy so we could finish grocery shopping. A mother was in there with her 3 kids. One by one, she would make each one of them sit down and was interrogating them. Where was your dad sat at the spring concert? Who did he sit by? Did he talk to any of the other moms? Was he laughing and smiling when he talked to Carter's mom? Did you guys come home right afterwards? She was writing it all down. Each child was not allowed to go play unless they answered her questions. What the frick? How to Weaponize Your Children in a Divorce, a step-by-step guide proudly written by McDonald's playground woman. Gross! I was listening to 2 of my kindergarten students talk about Christmas the day before break. One asked, "Do you believe in Santa?" And the other replied, "Yeah, but he doesn't come to my house because I'm in foster care." I was fixing a woman's computer when she got the phone call that her mother had suddenly passed away. She went from powerful executive assistant to fragile little girl in 3 seconds. It was heartbreaking. That's rough. I was once at a conference as like a junior marketing whatever, and me and my boss were in a hotel lobby about to meet with a big deal manager from another company to talk about a deal, when he took a call from his wife. She said there was a soldier outside her house with important news that could only be conveyed in person. She wouldn't talk to the guy because she knew what the news would be. Their son was in Iraq. His wife handed her phone to the guy in uniform on their doorstep. "I'm 500 miles away right now. Do you have something important to tell me about my son?" And then he looked at us and said he had to go home and walked away. I've been bitten in the nuts by 2 separate Scottish Terriers. I've never wanted to chase someone down the street and ask to hear the rest of the story so bad in my life. Worked at a summer camp for a few years, and I'm convinced kids don't realize you can hear them even when you're in the same room literally 3 feet away unless you're looking directly at them. Best conversation I've ever heard was between 2 9-year-olds. Kid 1, "My brother is totally going through puberty and he's only 11. Kid 2, Aw, lucky. I know, he even has armpit hair. If I had armpit hair, I'd shave it off and glue it on my face. That's a great idea. I was flabbergasted. I don't know if this qualifies, but it should. I was a photographer at a wedding, and while the bride was getting ready, I heard two bridesmaids, mid-20s, talking. One said to the other about how she recently found out that beans, probably as in the baked variety, were not bits of potato as she had always thought. They're fricking beans. When I read this, I thought it would be the stereotypical "she screwed the best man" or something like that. I'm kinda pleased with the outcome here. I was at Disney in high school, and I heard a guy say to someone, "You're tiggity, but ain't good enough to eat, so put your shoes back on." I'm 35 and still have no idea what that meant. Not so much messed up, just sad. Around 2004 or 2005, I was at a meeting. During a bathroom break, I heard two men talking. One of them had a brother who was killed in the September 11th attack on the Pentagon. Shortly after the attack, the brother's widow gave birth to their second child. A year or so later, the mother died of a terminal illness. The man speaking adopted his brother's kids. He and his wife had never planned on having kids, but they stepped up to raise them. It was a big adjustment, but he loved the kids and was doing the best that he could for them. When the police showed up at my door to tell me that my upstairs neighbor was dead, I heard the EMTs say, "We're gonna have to double bag him." Then I heard my neighbor's double-bagged body being dragged down the narrow staircase because a stretcher wouldn't fit him. Thump, thump, thump. For what it's worth, the EMTs and police were also upset about having to do that. I picked up the house phone to find a conversation already in progress. And that's how I learned my stepdad was having an affair with his brother's wife. As a 14-year-old super shy busboy at a restaurant in my hometown, terrified of the early 20s waitresses, setting up a banquet while the waitresses were chatting in the kitchen with the door open, I overheard the following. "What do you think of that new kid? Is he all right in the head or something? Ah, I think he's cute. Maybe he's just slow." Took a few years to get over that one. A bunch of junkies planning on how they're going to rob someone for money to get their next hit. I got out of there real fast. My brother overheard my dad telling Mum he wished that I had gone to Vietnam. That put at least 10 layers of security between us for more than 10 years. One co-worker to another as I walked in. "I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't like black people. I just don't think I could join the Klan." Oh God. Moments ago I was telling a likely former friend that he'd surpassed his quota of saying, "I'm not a racist, but." And now I come across, "I'm a racist, but." And I think I've interneted enough today. 2 points. Firstly, good on the latter person for calling out their coworker. Also, holy crap, where in the US was that first story from? And if you're already an admitted racist, what was your reason for not joining? The fricking membership payments? When I was 10 or 11, I overheard my stepmom talking to my friend's mum about my puppy that had recently disappeared. I learned the puppy had not run away, but that my stepmom had drove it to the middle of nowhere and, I quote, "set it free because she didn't want to have a puppy in the house." For those of you asking about my stepmom, she's literally the worst human being I've ever met. It's worth mentioning that she's got rid of my possessions before without asking, giving my clothes or toys to Goodwill while I was at school. I've asked her a few times about what really happened, and I gave her the opportunity to come clean. But she's always evasive about the whole thing. She'll eventually get what's coming to her. I hope she suffers as much as possible in her life and dies painfully. I caught my dad choking his chicken when I was in high school. I woke up really early and went to get a drink. I walked down the stairs and saw the TV was on and playing one of those commercials for Girls Gone Wild. I looked at the couch and my dad was just sitting there jerking it. But he didn't notice me because my dad was quite old and had bad hearing. I don't know if he saw me, but I rushed to the bathroom and stayed quiet in the dark until I thought he was finished. I felt bad for him and wanted him to at least get it done. Best single dad in the world, and I miss him, and I always laugh at that memory. I was a waitress, and I just took an order from a table of students that were all older than 18. One of them seemed pretty dim with their questions they were asking me, but nothing too stupid. One of her friends ordered duck gyoza. As I walked away, I heard her ask her friends what a duck was, and them start to explain. How the hell do you get to be over 18 and not know what a fricking duck is? My brother breaking up with his girlfriend. I learned from their conversation that they used latex protection for doing the deed, even though she was pretty allergic. The thing is, she didn't tell my brother this until they were on a break. and they were at it all the time. She would hide her infections and such from him for whatever reason. My dad's girlfriend is a special education teacher. I heard her telling my dad about a student she had with Down's syndrome. The kid had pretty crappy parents and lived in the rough part of town. Anyways, he never brushed his teeth, and as a result, his teeth were rotting and he had to get them all pulled. He was given pain medication, but his mother ended up taking all the pills herself. The boy would be in so much pain in class that he would have to be taken out of class because he couldn't stop yelling. He yelled so much that the stitches in his mouth ultimately ripped. As far as I know, the boy still lives with his mother. I don't know why nothing was done about this. It makes me angry. She did report it, but for some reason or another, the mother still has custody. She didn't go into it much and acted as though it wasn't something she wanted to talk about, so I didn't ask further questions. I overheard my wife say, "You look really handsome, babe." She was on a FaceTime call with the guy she was cheating on me with and didn't hear me come in early from work. Still the hardest thing I've ever heard. I listened in the hallway for a few minutes and then packed a bag and left. 10 years of marriage and we have a 2-year-old. It's pretty insane. I moved out, and divorce is final in October. She moved in with him. Life's rough sometimes. It'll get better, I hope. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work from home for a company based in Los Angeles, and each morning my engineering team convenes for a meeting. The new guy forgot to mute his headset, and we all tortuously ignored him, tickling his pickle for 5 minutes. Our meeting was like, yeah, so I committed those changes to and today I'll be working on changes to the mobile report. I should mention that if someone is talking or driving or whatever in the background, we always let them know if they need to go on mute. In this case, though, 15 people sat on the phone and talked over him. I'm not sure if it was a lack of guts or if we just didn't have the heart to embarrass him, but there was no mistaking what we heard. Sat on a bus home from work a couple of years back. An attractive young lady, blonde, in her 20s and dressed in smart business gear, got on and took a seat. If you'd seen the state of the bus, usually you'd understand why she caught my attention. Anyway, she picks up the phone and starts having a full conversation. It was the biggest 180 on a first impression I've ever had. Starts talking about her 2 kids who got taken into care because her and her ex couldn't stop beating each other up. The cracker of a quote was, "I'm not even sure they'll let me keep the one inside me yet." All this was a soundtrack to a silent bus. Not really eavesdropping when it's so in your face, but shocking all the same as this fairly normal 20-something revealed her openly mental home life. Let's hope that it was made up and intentionally loud to keep the possibility of unwanted suitors away. I was sitting next to a cutesy couple in 10th grade English class, and I saw her mouth the words, "I'm pregnant." I can see the plane crash going on through his eyes. I'm sure I've heard worse, but my memory is that of a goldfish. And in case you're wondering, they did have a happy ending. They moved in with each other down at their families in Idaho or Ohio or something, and they were very sweet people. Also, I took an extra English class and they doubled up on English that year. Our high school worked with 4 periods per semester with different classes. So it was technically an 11th grade English class and they were seniors. Sorry I didn't include it, so it's not as bad. But there was already a 10th grader with a 1.5-year-old, or in new mother language, 18-month-old, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if they were actually 10th graders. I woke up around midnight on Easter when I was about 6 to hopefully get a glimpse of the Easter Bunny, only to hear my mum crying to my dad on the phone, divorced, to come and get my brother and I because she has no money to get us any chocolate. She was hysterical. I went back to bed and pretended to be surprised when my dad was there in the morning to come and get us. He told us that the Easter Bunny got mixed up about what house we were going to be at. Props to your mum for asking for help when she needed it, and props to your dad for giving the correct answer. Yep, although we don't know what the full story was here, there's at least a small uplifting show of co-parenting after a divorce. I was at a music festival a few years back, asleep in the tent at about 9:30 a.m., and I woke up to 2 guys speaking in panicked voices outside the tent, saying, "I know we gave him the pills, but it wasn't our fault he took them. It's not our fault. We brought him to the first aid tent. What more could we do?" and more to that effect. They also said that they'd written on his arm that he'd taken 5 pills and dropped him at the first aid tent. As soon as I heard them leave, I stuck my head out of the tent to see my best friend with her head out of her tent, both of us wondering what the frick that was about. Then we found a bag of white powder and about 25 pills in baggies, which these guys had just dropped to get rid of any evidence. Maybe an hour later, we heard that someone had died at the festival from taking 5 pills and overdosing. The penny dropped as we joined the dots between the conversation we'd overheard, the discarded substances, and the death. Very creepy. Was once walking behind 2 really good-looking girls in the street and heard one of them say to the other, "I was so constipated yesterday, I just wanted to get it out with an ice cream scooper." My mother recently said she'd been constipated so long it felt like she had appendicitis, and she practically needed a jackhammer to get the crap out of me. Thanks for that, Mum. Once I got a ride in the casual commute lane with 2 women in a gold Mercedes. I sat in the back while they carried on with their conversation. They spent about 10 minutes talking about a friend of theirs who was looking so great after she had lost a ton of weight. After a pause, one of them said, "Well, it's too bad about the cancer." 3 girls were together at a bus stop. I was behind them. One was telling a story as the others listened. Girl number 1, "She called me a dirty, lying hussy and she threw her bottle at me, and it shattered on the wall, nearly hitting me." "Oh my god, for real? Really?" "Yeah. Then I told her to F off and choke on an eggplant before I slammed the door and left." "Oh my god, what a B-word." "I know, right? That's the last time I go to visit my aunt during withdrawals." My boss screwing the secretary in the break room. Did they not realize that you were still there, or did they not care? This morning, my brother overheard 2 schoolboys talking about Chloe refusing to do hand stuff to Jake, so Jake asked her friend instead. Heard this conversation at my dining hall. "Don't eat fries that you dropped on the floor, that's disgusting." "Sarah, I've literally had my tongue in your butthole. I think I'm fine." About 11 years ago, at high school, one of my friends found her father hung in the backyard. They were a really nice family and he was a great guy too. They had these cafes at libraries and the food was great. But his wife had an affair with her personal trainer and probably he knew. And if I recall correctly, they had some financial issues as well. He arranged his clothes for the next day as he did every day. It was a shock for everyone. We were in the middle of a class when we discovered it. We gathered ourselves in the school's coordinator and after some discussion, he let us leave early to support our friend. She was in shock, complete disbelief, wasn't even crying. The funeral was arranged for the next day. His family flew in from another state to say their last goodbyes. It was scheduled to 3 p.m., and after the priest's speech, he avoided any hell citation for some reason and just said something about disturbed souls and their path to heaven. Then they started burying him, and the widow starts to cry really hard. Then I overheard one of his relatives, probably the guy's sister, "What the frick does she think she's doing? She killed him. Oh my god, I hate her so much." It's not as messed up as others' comments, but the suffering and hate mixed together made this day really unforgettable. A very young girl gave her mother a picture she drew as a gift while on public transportation. The mother then rudely rejected the gift. That made me quite sad. "I only had her so I didn't have to go to work," said my mother about my younger sister. Turns out that as I got old enough to need less supervision, my mother realized that she'd suddenly be expected to actually make financial contributions like a normal person. That clearly wasn't for her, so she accidentally got pregante again. Took me a long time to realize what I'd actually heard. I'm aware she's a scumbag, and this is just one example of how. We no longer speak, and a decade after making that decision, I'm still glad of it. College dining hall. Me and my best friends, 5 or 6 of us maybe, heard a boy at the next table start to brag about something. He's clearly an upper-class man, older than 21, so while it could have been a party, it wasn't likely, so we started to eavesdrop. Little by little, we're just getting angrier and angrier. He's bragging on about how he adopted this kitten and tortured it to death. His buddy has got it all on camera, just going on and on about what he did to this poor animal. My buddy is a huge cat lover and we basically had to restrain him. Reports were filed and the phone was seized. One nice twist to the story, though, is that the cat torturer was caught and an unspeakable act offender was also caught. How, you might ask? Yeah, the cameraman had taken phone videos of himself roofying and performing the unspeakable act on girls at a local bar. So 2 criminals were caught, I guess. Overheard the end of a conversation that completed with a very large, emo, gay Mexican boy telling an incredibly skinny girl, "And then I said to her, 'That's the bed I did your brother in,' and I slapped her in the face." If you were in a restaurant next to those 2, the rules of comedy dictate that you had to abruptly shout, "Check please," and hightail it out of there. When I was 16, I served a customer who was switching between ordering food with me and organizing for somebody to go and beat up a guy for hitting a significant female in his life. Once overheard a few people talking about kidnaps on my work. They were talking about doing it. I work in a restaurant in Brazil, and they were 4 guys talking about kidnapping someone. They were deadly serious. I overheard them enough through a thin wall. The worst part? They were cops. They still come to eat here from time to time and are notoriously dirty. One of them has a $500,000 car, while getting less than $2,000 per month. I never did anything about it. Who would I call? The other dirty cops? It's not creepy if you go into her locker and check her timetable. Yes, Chuck, it really is creepy. I was traveling with a friend through Honduras, and in the hostel we were staying at, we met this cool Aussie lesbian. One morning they were chatting right next to me as I woke up, but I didn't immediately get up and start talking. I realized they were talking about me. My friend, who I'd known for a few years and had a friend with benefits thing with in the past, was telling her that she thought I was transgender. I'm not. It was really strange to hear someone tell an almost complete stranger her opinion about my personal gender identity. I was at a 24-hour diner and breakfast joint in DC on a Sunday. A guy and 2 trashy-looking women at the counter next to us were planning out an adult film shoot. Not joking about it or anything, like it was all set and they were just figuring out some details. One time my mom told me to text my dad about something. I completely forgot what it was, and I just saw a crap ton of dirty messages. Rest in peace, soul and innocence. In a weird sort of way, this makes me happiest of all the responses. Everyone else is talking about terrible things happening and weird crap going on, but this one still shows parents keeping it spicy in a modern way, even after having kids. What amazing comebacks have you heard come out of nowhere? In 10th grade, my friend called a classmate illiterate. He replied, "Joke's on you, I don't know what that means." I think about that a lot. Story I heard from a parent-teacher conference. A mum got back a report for her son's school stating that he was illiterate. Her response? "That's a dirty lie. His dad and I were married 2 days before he was born." My grandma was playing bridge with her friends and the subject of age did come up. My grandma said she was 63 and the next woman said, "A lady doesn't discuss such things." So my grandma said, "Oh, don't worry, dear. I'm sure when I'm your age I won't want to discuss it either." Damn, I've noticed that old people can throw shade that we can only marvel at. They've got this sweet experience that can only come with age and a lifetime to hone their skills. There was this guy at a frat party that whipped out his pecker in front of this girl and asked her what it looked like. Without missing a beat, she replied, "It looks like a male member, only smaller." My mother-in-law is 4'11". She once asked a 6'5" coworker of mine if he played basketball, to which he replied, "No, do you play miniature golf?" My friend is 4'10". A larger man at work likes to constantly point this out to her, as if she's in some way unaware of it. One day she got sick of him. It went something along the lines of him saying, "Well, at least I'm not a short ass like you are," and her saying, "At least I'm not fat like you." Well, that's going a bit far, isn't it? I don't see how. I can't do anything about being short. You could lose weight. I had this one teacher who would say, "In a battle of wits, you have come unarmed." When he said that to one of the students in my class one day, the student promptly responded, "Then I challenge you to a battle of hair." I should note that the teacher was bald. I feel like I'm just experiencing all of the cut content from the sword insult fighting in the Monkey Island games. Keep it coming, people. My team leader said at work, "Have you tried playing dad to 40 kids?" referring to us regular employees as the children. My coworker, without missing a beat, replies, "Have you ever had a deadbeat dad?" I was dying. "Your mom is a lady of the night." Well, at least mine charges. A friend in 6th grade came to school with a black eye. Everyone was naturally asking what had happened. This girl said, "Your white trash dad probably beat you," in front of everybody. He responded with, "At least I have a dad." Her dad had self-deleted 2 years earlier. I'd say he took it too far, but it was very quick and burned her like 1,000 suns. When Jimmy Carr began in one of his sets by saying, "First time I was ever in bed with someone," and a girl in the crowd said, "You mean yesterday?" The crowd went wild with laughter, and he waited for everyone to quiet down and then with perfect timing said, "I'm glad you remember." Years ago, I was out drinking with friends and some people we'd just met, including a guy I was interested in. There was a lot of banter flying back and forth. In an effort to seem cool to our new acquaintances, I threw a lame, slightly personal insult to my friend across the table. I don't even really remember what it was, as it was so long ago, but probably along the lines of your mum joke. Despite obviously hearing what I'd said, he looked directly at me and said in a non-aggressive way, "Sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was that you said?" Feeling a little stupid at this point, I repeated it. Once again, louder, and our company was paying attention now, he said, "Oh, I didn't get it that time either. What did you say?" At that point, the table had fallen silent, and with all eyes on me, I felt so small and embarrassed and just mumbled, "Never mind," into my drink. Looking back, he clearly knew exactly what he was doing, and I've used this tactic since. It's so simple yet effective, and guaranteed to make your opponent want the earth to swallow them whole. I wasn't there, but my brother overheard two kids on a bus playing a game, where you can see who can yell the words for male member the loudest. It got too loud, and the bus driver, who was a woman in maybe her 50s, out of the blue, yelled, "Sounds like it's coming from someone who wishes they had one." The entire bus erupted in laughter. President Calvin Coolidge was famously taciturn. His campaign train stopped briefly in one town. A woman called out, "Mr. Coolidge, my husband bet me I couldn't get you to say more than 2 words. Now, what do you say to that?" The train lurched into motion. "You lose," he said. My buddy and I used to hang out with a guy that always smelled. He barely showered, even before work, and we would always give him crap for that. One day, my buddy was driving and he let a toot go. It didn't smell that bad, but the guy who smelled made a comment along the lines of, "God, even your toots are weak." And my buddy, without hesitation, says, "It's because your body odor was covering it up." I had a friend who was adopted. She was actually a huge bully and made fun of me because my mum worked 3 jobs and so she was never home. One day she was in bully mode and says, "At least my mum loves me enough to stay home and be with me." And I clapped back with, "At least my real mum loved me enough to keep me." She then smacked me. She got in trouble and so did I, but she never made fun of my mum for not being home again. This guy brought a new lunchbox to school and was being made fun of by this girl in a wheelchair. She told him, "Nice lunchbox," to which he immediately responded, "Nice legs." Back in high school, I was president of the role-playing game club. It was a real shell organization. We just existed so that on Fridays we could play in an English teacher's classroom after school, and we needed to keep the bathrooms open. Summer came and something like 3/4 of the squad were sentenced to summer school. So on most days we'd get together to play some D&D on the abandoned lunch quad until it got dark. One day these 2 girls came up to the group. Bear in mind, we're playing D&D, so we largely have no ability to converse with females. And these are your more adventurous girls from school, but they were very chill, just casually talking with us about what we were doing and all that jazz. One of them started playing with my bike helmet. It was old as hell, and the glue holding the inner styrofoam to the outer shell was all gone, and they'd come apart if you grabbed one and not the other. So this girl picks up my helmet to ask about all the ski stickers on it, and the foam fell out. "Your helmet sucks wang," she declared. It was an instinct, my reaction, born of long nights chugging energy drinks and rolling dice. Maybe your head just sucks wang. Now, if this interaction happened between my buddy Nikolai and I, that would have been funny, but she just got offended and left. I once read that Margot Fontaine was having dinner with Jean Harlow and a group of other people, and Jean kept calling her Margot, pronouncing the T. Fontaine said, "No, Jean, the T is silent, as in Harlow." 1930s savagery right there. A male colleague was once telling us how he fell asleep during oral fun times the night before. My other colleague Ed immediately asked, "What woke you up, the stiff eggplant hitting the back of your throat?" "No need to call me Sir, Professor." Were you born like this, or did you follow a course? A bully calls an idiot the C word. The idiot says, "You are what you eat." The bully laughs. The idiot says, "I guess that makes you a butthole." Bully picked on a quiet kid, and the quiet kid smashed his face to a wall. You know, I'm not sure if this latest one quite matches the others, but maybe it was his comeback in life after a couple of years of quietly taking crap. So we'll use it. And now for some historical burns from a former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Winston Churchill to Lady Astor after she called him disgustingly drunk. "I may be drunk, miss, but in the morning I will be sober, and you will still be ugly." Also from Winston Churchill and some other woman, "If you were my husband, I'd poison your tea, and madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Also, for premiere of his play Pygmalion, George Bernard Shaw sent Churchill tickets with a note, "Bring a friend if you have one," and Churchill's response was, Can't make opening night, but will come second night if you have one. A guy stole my friend's soccer ball one day. We were 13, so I watched as she went up to get it back. He said he wouldn't give it back unless she gave him a BJ. She responded with, "Sorry, I can't. My mum told me not to put small things in my mouth." She then snatched the soccer ball and walked away happily. Hey, let's keep my mom out of this, and I'll keep out of your mom. A mean girl on the school bus said to me, "You're one of the ugliest dudes I've ever seen, Joe." And I said, "Well, Tara, looks like we have something in common." The whole bus started cracking up laughing, and she was really angry. Never said a word to me ever again. My brother and I were about 12 and 10 respectively, and we went skiing in Vermont for the day. But we didn't really ski, and we certainly didn't have any nice gear or clothes, so my brother wore the only snowsuit he had, which was a one-piece, and it was brown, like dark brown, and he put on his brown hat. We were gliding down a pass that was under the ski lift when I fell down and my brother stopped right next to me to help me up. The guy on the lift above me looks down at us and screams, "Hey, kid in brown. You look like a brown piece of crap." And my brother, with perfect comedic timing, says in his high-pitched, prepubescent voice, "That's what your mother said when I pulled my wang out of her butt." I was hysterical. I couldn't stop laughing, and everyone that was on the lift started laughing too. And my brother, of course, took off his brown mittens to give him the finger. I'm still laughing. My brother had a wart on his hand and a little bottle of medicine that he was using, I don't know, a few times a day maybe. My friend Julie was over, and the three of us were sitting and chatting. My brother was casually tossing the little bottle in the air and catching it. Julie, who was, let's be honest, a snobby jerk, said, "Gee, I wish I were as cool as you with your wart medicine." And my brother said, very seriously, "I'm sorry, Julie, I'd be happy to share with you, but there isn't enough to cover your entire head." Kumail Nanjiani had a wicked comeback while reading mean tweets. The tweet said, "Is Kumail Nanjiani's wang multiple colors?" And Kumail said, "Yes, every color of your mum's lipstick. I just about died." A friend of mine was welding, and this D-bag at his workplace says while overlooking it, "That's gonna come out messed up." And my friend replied immediately with, "That's what the doctor told your parents at the first ultrasound." Huh? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Junior high, I had a science teacher that looking back was pretty cool. Used to let everyone give him a hard time and was pretty goofy and such. I don't remember what prompted it, but one of my classmates asked a question and he answered, "Don't set unrealistic expectations." And my friend, not the person who asked the initial question, jumped in, "Then why are you teaching?" Student is whispering to a classmate while teacher is speaking, 6th grade math, and the teacher says, "Am I interrupting something?" And the student says, "Yeah, but don't let it happen again." Epic. Yeah, well, the jerk store called and they're running out of you. When I was younger, me and my brother were having a roast battle of sorts to say the most messed up, funny stuff that we could say to each other. My mum walked in and says, "Oh look, a battle of wits between unarmed opponents." Needless to say, that put a swift end to our attempted humor. A guy who played in the Samurai faction in For Honor came in talking crap about the Knight players, and one of them responded with, "Keep it up and the next king won't be decided by the sword in the stone, but by who can pull my boot from your butt." I still laugh at it to this day, even though I haven't played For Honor in forever. One of my brothers said, "Stop talking crap." The other one said, "Everything that comes out of my mouth is sweet." Yeah, no wonder you're fat as frick. Whenever someone says, "F you," I say, "Pay me." It stumps a lot of people, sometimes resulting with an, "Ugh, F you." So I say again, "Well, pay me." One time I was at Geeks Who Drink Bar Trivia here in Dallas. Me and the other two people on my team were in 3rd place during the 6th round score announcement. The first place team had a full group of 5 or 6 people. After the trivia master announced the scores, I drunkenly shouted out loud, "Yeah, but how many people are on their team?" And the trivia master overheard me, and he instantly said in the microphone so everyone could hear, "Enough to kick your fricking butt." It was such a good retort that I wasn't even mad, and he was right. Look man, trivia masters at these things are often as not stand-up comedians who are doing extra gigs to make ends meet. Going toe-to-toe with one of them is not for the faint-hearted, and I'm not surprised you got burned. One of my friends got into an argument at a bar with someone else, and the guy walked up to him and tried choking him out with one hand from the front. My friend just smiled the whole time, and when a bouncer grabbed the guy choking my friend and was escorting him out, my friend yelled, "I've banged chicks who choked me harder than that." I was really proud of him. Last day of 5th grade, a short, chubby kid was going around the teacherless classroom giving out quick roasts. He gets to me and says, "Hey you, your head looks like a basketball." I quickly replied, "It looks like you ate a basketball." I'm still very proud of 5th grade me. The guy says, "You effed up, John." And John says, "I only F up when my wife's on top." "I know you are, but what am I?" "I can't tell you, 'cause you'll cry." Adlai Stevenson ran for president twice in 1952 and 1956. A woman gushed at him, "Mr. Stevenson, you have the vote of every thinking American." And his reply was, "Sorry, ma'am, I need a majority." Adlai was quite witty and a true statesman. My folks were yellow dog Democrats who would vote for a yellow dog on the ballot instead of a Republican, and told me how cool he was. When my bro was about 10, it used to be my job to take him for his Saturday morning soccer game. It was run by his school and they'd play other school groups. It sucked as a teenager, but I mostly just hung out with the other mums and cut up oranges and stuff. I've got to mention that I live in a pretty white area, and my brother and I look absolutely and unapologetically Muslim, because we are. Anyway, my little brother's team came off the field after absolutely thrashing another school. The school is in a pretty rural, read racist, area, and one of the kids ran up to my bro and screams, "You learn how to play like that in terror bombing camp?" And my bro picks up an orange and replies, "Yeah, we practice against the skinhead youth on Sundays. See you there." And he threw an orange at him. Sophomore year of high school, 1995. A close friend of mine had just gotten her first of what would be eventually many tattoos, a rubber ducky on her belly, just beside her navel. We had a church camp thing that weekend, and she tried to keep it covered as much as she could. But she had to keep applying Neosporin and such, so we kept ducking out to hallways and spare conference rooms at this massive church, so she could take care of business and I'd look out for any adults who might yell at her for the tattoo. So maybe the 5th time we went out to get her tattoo some air, these girls from another church sneak out and follow us. Picture the cast of Mean Girls. Wealthy, snotty, preppy, pretty, and totally up their own butts. They're all blonde, thin as rails, and dressed like a Land's End advertisement. My friend and I were also skinny blondes, but she dressed grunge and I was into the skater, raver look at the same time. A total poser, as I didn't do substances, but I had a pixie haircut with a green streak in it, and I wore little boys' polo shirts and enormous pants. Not the type these girls thought of as cool. Anyway, the lead blonde clone walks up to us and asks in her flat Valley Girl voice, "Oh my god, is that a tattoo?" And my friend goes, "Yep," as she's dabbing little spots of blood away and applying ointment. And the girl goes, "Is it real?" And my friend goes, "No, it's fake, and so is the blood." Blondie catches her sarcasm, amazingly enough, and stares hard at my friend's belly for a moment and asks, "What's going to happen when you get fat?" And without missing a beat or even looking up from what she's doing, my friend said, "I don't know. What happened when you got fat?" The girl was open-mouthed for a second and then lamely called her the B-word and stalked off with her entourage. But I could tell my friend got to her. She was the comeback goddess. She always knew exactly what to say to level a person who crossed her. My brother brought his college girlfriend home with him during Christmas break. Dad's pulling a double shift, and my mum ran off to France with some fancy European guy, and I'm teabagging my classmates on Halo 3. The two of them get bored just sitting there on the couch since I'm not much of a conversationalist. Anyway, one thing leads to another, if you know what I mean. Unfortunately for them, my dad's boss had a Scrooge epiphany and sent them home early for Christmas Eve. So Dad walks in carrying this giant Christmas ham to surprise us with, only to find his eldest son doing something pretty specific with his girlfriend's butt. Dad goes full Leviticus on my bro and declares the butt an unclean organ and then said it was detestable to practice sodomy in front of me. I tried to defend my brother with the old, "I've seen worse on the internet" defense, but Dad just talked over me. The disrespect teed off my brother and he tore into my dad. Maybe if you ate Mom's booty more, she wouldn't have left us. Brutal perhaps, but it did shut down Dad's biblical rant. Merry Christmas, everyone. When we were kids, my older brother and I were arguing about some crap and I said, "I knew that before you were born." Without hesitation, he replied, "Did you have a library in your part of Dad's ball bag?" And we both wet ourselves laughing for 5 minutes. There was once a kid in 7th grade that was at least a foot shorter than me, and he was trying to roast me. At one point, I just interrupted him and said, "Hey, at least I can go on the fricking Ferris wheel." I and those around me got a kick out of that. Your mom's a lesbian. Yeah, with your mom. Anytime a guy says he has a big wang, I tell him, spit it out, it isn't yours. My uncle, a genial old man with a beard sitting in a pub. A younger guy looks at him and says, "What the frick are you looking at?" My uncle says, "Oh, sorry, sonny. If you don't know what the frick you are, I'm afraid I can't help you." The younger guy looked puzzled for a moment and then decided it wasn't worth the intellectual headache of pushing it further. Guys, many people in the comments of these stories are pointing out that a lot of the elderly have razor-sharp wits and do not give an F. Don't go up against them unless you're bringing your insult A-game. I've been rejected by better people than you. My dad once told my 17-year-old brother, "You're just mad because the best part of you ran down the crack of your mum's butt." This loser walked into class. The teacher said, "You're late," and he instantly said, "A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." He was lucky the teacher knew Lord of the Rings. A slightly chubby girl told my friend, who admittedly had a rather bad neckbeard, that he should shave. Without skipping a beat, he told her she should shave the pounds off. A guy with no chin said, "At least I don't have 2 chins." And the guy with 2 chins said, "At least I have 1. Did I stutter? Yes. Then you heard me twice. My ex-boss was in a bar in Onslow watching England valiantly lose in heartbreaking style in a soccer tournament to Germany yet again, when he got accidentally bumped into by a German fan as he was reversing without due attention. "Oh, sorry," apologized the German chap. "For which world war?" quips Nick. Apparently the punch came out of nowhere. I worked in a paint shop for a while and got really good at guy talk. One day, while walking into the office, one of the guys started making fun of me because I wash my hands. Something along the lines of, "Don't forget to wash your hands, little lady." I'm a guy. And I replied without even thinking, "Yeah, no, I don't want to give your girl a yeasty." My short friend made some snarky comment and others were gassing her up. She said, "Yeah, I know how to throw shade." And then I said, "What do you know about throwing shade? You're not even tall enough to cast a shadow." And that's the comeback I'm the most proud of. My sister was being a total witch to me, like attacking my weight, my career, my grades. After being fed up, I left the room, and before passing through the door, I turned and said, "Jon Snow comes back to life next episode," and I left. She was catching up with the show. Can you get away with mouthing off to a cop? Alright, can you say your alphabet to J for me? Oh sure, which one of you guys is J? I'd just picked up my paycheck back in high school and must have been 16 or 17 and a fairly new driver. An officer pulled me over for not pulling completely into the road, going from driveway to driveway, like I drove 10 feet on the wrong side, but there was no traffic. The officer said, "Can you even afford a ticket as a new driver?" And my dumb butt said, "I did just pick up my paycheck." It wasn't until afterwards that I thought more along the lines of having demerit points on my license is more than likely what he meant. He let me go with a warning. Driving through Kansas City and I got pulled over. I was wearing a Twins cap. The cop said something about being ready to give me a warning, but then he saw my cap, and I said, "Hey, it's not like the Royals and Twins have been good at the same time." He said he's actually a Cubs fan, and I couldn't stop myself from saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." He laughed and gave me a warning. We were in a car park just off the motorway in a Toyota MR2. The police pulled in and got out of their car. One of the officers put his hand on the bonnet, the hood, of the MR2 and said, "Bonnet's a bit hot. Been ragging it, have we?" And I replied, "Funny that, mate. It's rear engine." The second officer found it hilarious, and the first looked incredibly embarrassed. I was waiting to buy something at a store, but there was no one behind the cash register. There was already a lady in front of me who seemed to have been waiting for a while. We rang the little bell a couple of times, but no one appeared. After waiting some time, I joked, "We should just steal this stuff. That will get their attention." The lady in front of me responded by showing me her dry cleaning bag, full of police uniforms. So I said the first thing that came to mind. "You have to get your uniforms dry cleaned? Does that get expensive?" And we ended up having a fairly cheerful conversation about dress codes and employee perks, and the laundry facilities in different neighborhood apartment buildings, and the turnaround time of different neighborhood dry cleaners until the cashier finally showed up. That sounds exactly like my luck. Of all the people to make that joke to, it had to be a gosh darn law enforcer. Luckily, this lady sounded chill. Got pulled over on my motorcycle. The cop said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Because I wasn't wearing my seatbelt? He got a chuckle, and I only got a warning. The next cop didn't find it nearly as amusing. Cop said to me, "Were you eating an apple while driving?" "Can't I eat while I drive?" "No. But I can smoke, right?" "Yeah." Then I was smoking the apple. I once pulled myself over after I thought I blew through a red light, since there was a cop right there. I was a new driver, saw him and freaked out. He asked me why he shouldn't write me a ticket, and I told him, "I really don't want you to?" Got off with a warning. I work nights, so the cops will occasionally cruise through our parking lot in the middle of nowhere and just check things out. I was outside on my break smoking and playing Jetpack Joyride when they lowered their window. "What are you doing here at this time of night?" "My fricking job. Why are you out here at this time of night?" "Our fricking jobs. Have a nice night." "You too." Montreal cops are nice, despite their silly trousers. He asked me if I had a dead body in my back seat. I said, "Oh, totally. You want to meet him? He's kinda shy." He laughed and told his partner, "He said totally." Took my license, sat in their car for a minute, and then drove up next to me, handed me my cards from their window, and drove off. I later realized that a coat and hat were on top of a mess in my back seat and actually could have looked like a dead body. A cop pulled me and my friend over when we were both 17. Pretty sure he just saw a couple of teens in a car late at night and figured we were up to no good. That being said, we had a lot of green herb in the car, in a bag. The cop came over and said, "So, you have anything illegal in your car?" "Just my good looks," I reply. The cop laughs and lets us leave. My heart just about gave out, it was beating so fast. He told me how much over the limit I was going, and I said, "Well, you looked bored sitting there, so I figured I'd give you something to do." He laughed and let me off the whole thing with a warning. I was flying back from Europe once. At the Brussels airport, I brought a jar of mustard in duty-free. They sealed it in the special bag. Put it in my carry-on. Got it through customs, no problem. Bringing it back through TSA in the US, at a major international airport, it gets confiscated. It's in a sealed jar, in a sealed bag, having clearly been brought at an airport and just brought through an international border. The TSA guy confiscates it. I told him to keep saving the country one jar of mustard at a time. Yeah, TSA customs are stupid. When I was 13 and coming back from vacation in England, I had some guy completely flip his crap, screaming at me because I dared to pull my old iPod out of my pocket for 2 seconds to check the time, not realizing that was a problem. I got yelled at by some grouchy middle-aged guy and he went on for a solid minute over it. Like, is it really necessary to flip crap on some kid over something so stupid? Just say, "Hey, that's not allowed. Put it away." My Uber driver was telling me a story about how he got pulled over for going 90 on a sharp turn. The radar was obviously malfunctioning because he would either have flipped his car or slid off the road if he was going that fast. The motorcycle cop was too stupid to figure this out and threatened to arrest him, so he said, "What are you gonna do, put me on the back of your bike?" The cop got super teed off and actually arrested him and gave him the ticket, and the cop lied about where he clocked the Uber driver. Luckily, the Uber driver had a dash cam and got the ticket and all other charges dropped. But damn, the gall and stupidity of that cop make me feel sorry for whoever else has to deal with him. I don't know what happened to the cop, guys. Yeah, lying under oath is bad, but I don't know what happened to anyone that isn't the Uber driver. In college, I once thanked a cop for not being a jerk about it, like most officers are, after getting ticketed. He wrote it all down, and the judge repeated that to me when I fought the ticket in court. She was clearly amused, and I got out of the ticket. He asked why I was going 52 in a 35, and I told him, general lack of awareness. This didn't get me out of the ticket, but it gave the cop a pretty good laugh. Years ago, during a heavy substance-fueled bender at a London festival, I walked up to some policemen and said, "Guess what I'm on?" They smirked and told me to move along. I had one ask, "You were speeding, so why shouldn't I give you a citation?" I said, "I'm not worth the paperwork." He gave me a little half-smile for a brief second, before his face returned to the stern face that he had the entire encounter. My friend got pulled over doing 20 over. We were college kids at the time. Officer walks over to the window and does his normal, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" routine, and then turns to me when it's all done and asks, "So, should I give your friend here a ticket?" And with a smile I said, "Yes, sir, he most likely deserves it." The cop laughed, smiled, and walked away. Well, you got off the ticket. I do wonder if you got a vicious punch in the arm as soon as the cop pulled away, though. My birthday 3 years ago. I was crossing the street to my car, and suddenly 2 squad cars pull up, each with 2 officers in them for some reason. As I was unlocking my car, all 4 got out of their cars and approached me. One of them asked me to please stop and walk over to them. I did. He then asked if I knew why they were stopping me, to which I replied, "I'm assuming you're strippers." "Excuse me?" "Yeah, you must be strippers. It's my birthday and 4 suspiciously good-looking police officers just stopped me for absolutely no reason. 3 of them laughed and 1 did not. I then had to wait for 10 minutes while he wrote me a warning for jaywalking. When I was a kid, my parents had one of those Oldsmobile Silhouette minivans with the long nose. I was driving it and I accelerated to get through a yellow light before it turned red. That's when the cop turned on the lights. When he got to the window, he asked, "Do you know what a yellow light means, son?" I said, "That means it's going to turn red soon." He said, "No, it means clear the intersection." I told him, "Officer, with the size of this vehicle and the rate I was moving, had anything entered the intersection, I'd have cleared it right out, I promise." He laughed and told me that since I'd caught him off guard and made him laugh, he would let me off with a warning. Me and my 3 friends made a big cranberry vodka in a liter cranberry bottle, and we were walking towards a bar in Manhattan, passing it around. One friend was holding it when a cop slowly pulled up to us. I was the one closest to his window, and he waved me over and asks, "Why is your friend holding a bottle of cranberry juice?" It was pretty obvious it wasn't cranberry on a Friday night in the East Village. I said, "He's on his period." The cop laughed and made us dump it. My brother and I, both underage and both very drunk, were walking home with a dozen donuts and the remains of a 6-pack when the cops saw us mostly stumbling along the main road. They pulled around behind us and scared the pants off us with the siren. One cop got out of the car and asked us where we were going. We offered him our donuts. He took our beer. Joke was on him, it was Bud Light. They left us to continue on our way home. I don't think we'd get away with that today. You know that whole Dave Chappelle bit about, "I didn't know I couldn't do that"? Basically, that. I was speeding, although I didn't know I was speeding because there wasn't a sign for miles in a construction zone. The officer pulled me over and told me how, since it's a construction zone, the ticket could have been so much worse than a regular speeding ticket. I said, I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I know there's normally signage saying "men at work, slow down" or something of that nature, but 1, no signs giving me a speed limit, and 2, nobody working. As far as I was concerned, I was driving the normal speed limit, as I was unaware that it had dropped. I didn't know I couldn't do that, got me out of a $700 ticket because he let me off with a warning. I worked at the NCO club on an Air Force base as a teenager. I was a cook sometimes and a dishwasher. I blew through a stop sign and was speeding. Apparently I was being lit up and chased and didn't realize it until I saw the gate closing as I was trying to get off base. The security forces, AFMP, asked me a bunch of questions about it, and I told him I wasn't paying attention due to my eating the cheesy fries that I made sitting in the passenger seat. Then I asked, "Do you want some?" He stared at me for a second and told me to leave. Yelling at a cop for calling me Jack Sparrow instead of Captain Jack Sparrow, while heavily intoxicated and dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 18, a friend of mine and I stepped out of a restaurant to have a cigarette. We were in the parking lot smoking when a cop pulls up. We weren't doing anything illegal, so we kept doing what we were doing. He walks up to us and asks what we're doing. We tell him, but he doesn't believe us because there were reports of cars getting broken into, which I doubt. He decides to search us. We should have resisted, but didn't know any better at the time. He pulls a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket, and with a smirk on his face, he asks, "What am I gonna find in here?" My friend keeps a straight face and says, "It's the Emancipation Proclamation." To which the cop says, "Yeah, right." Turns out, it actually was a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation. He had been to the History Museum that day and got a tiny copy as a souvenir. The cop didn't say anything, just handed back the bag and got in his car. "Did you see the speed limit sign?" "Yes, sir, I just didn't see you sitting behind it." I'll never forget how hard he scrunched up his face, trying not to laugh. I was exiting the beer tent at a local summer festival. There were 2 county sheriffs guarding the entrance and exit at the time. Drunk me walks up to one and says, "To protect and serve, right?" And he replies, "Yes, sir." Again, drunk me says, "Well, you could serve me by protecting this beer. I'll be right back." And then I set the beer on the ground near his feet while I went to use the porta-john bathroom. I came back and my beer was still there, untouched. The officer did his job. Got pulled over for quickly accelerating after a traffic light. When the cop asked why, I said it was to try to get away from the butthole with their brights on. He turned to see he still had his brights on and said to have a safe drive home. Well, I'd say you really took a gamble there, and in this case it paid off. But given how many innocents we've seen get ticketed, I'd say you got lucky. When I was 20, I worked at a video store. This one night we had to do inventory, which we started at midnight, and I helped out until 3 a.m. But I was the opener, so I left. I was on my way home when I was pulled over. My tail light was out. I didn't know. The cop left me off with a warning, but it took 15 minutes for him to run my stuff. 2 miles down the same road, but in a different town, I was pulled over by a cop from that town. My tail light was out. I didn't know. The cop let me off with a warning, but it took almost 20 minutes to do so. 5 more miles down the road and yet another town over, I was pulled over again. It's now 4 a.m. My tail light is out. I didn't know. I'm let off with a warning. I make it home at 4:45 a.m. I have work at 9 a.m. I got to sleep. I woke up, skipping a much-needed shower, and left for work. I get pulled over about a mile away from my job. The officer said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yep, my tail light's out." The officer, "If you know why haven't you fixed it?" "Well, officer, I left work 6 hours ago. I was pulled over 3 times in an hour and a half, and each time I was told that my tail light was out. In the 4 hours since I got home, I went to bed and woke up to go back to work, and I haven't had time to fix it." The officer asked, 3 times? "Yep, so if you're going to give me the ticket, give me the ticket, otherwise I'm assuming that you and your fellow officers just want me to be late to things." I was let off with a warning. In short, got pulled over 4 times in 5 hours and let off with warnings. Driving a 1990 Mercury Sable, dented and miscolored. Do you have any large denominations of US currency with you? Was it the flashy car that tipped you off? You were driving 20 miles below the speed limit. Yes. Why? A cop was following me. A party got busted when I was in college. A majority of the attendees were underage. The cocky campus policeman walked up and said, well, looks like we're going to be checking IDs and handing out underages tonight." Immediately after saying this, his 19-year-old daughter walked out. I was sitting on the porch and said, "You still want those IDs?" It was my first time getting pulled over. I asked for his autograph. I didn't even have my license yet. I was on a learner's permit, but I was late to school and my mum kept telling me to hurry. When I got pulled over, the cop told me I was doing 53 and a 35. I looked at him and said, "Dyslexia?" He was not amused, but he didn't give me any crap for being a smartass. Got pulled up for wearing headphones as a hands-free device. Apparently doing that is illegal in Pennsylvania. He said it was because then you can't hear sirens, so I replied, then why can deaf people get driver's licenses? I tried to call the police to report a crime, but it wasn't an emergency. A guy was walking around my neighborhood, obviously casing houses. I called the police department after hours and couldn't get a hold of anyone. I passed a cop while driving and sped past him so that he'd pull me over. When he said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yeah, because I wanted you to so I could actually talk to an officer." He went and found the guy and arrested him because he had a warrant out on him. For suspected DUI, I wasn't drunk at all, after about 15 to 20 minutes of field sobriety tests. Do you know the difference between being intoxicated and being impaired? Do you know which one you are? One of them involves me having at least a blood alcohol content of 0.08 in the state of New York, and the other is a synonym you want me to admit so that you can take me in even though I passed all of your sobriety tests. There was a long pause. "You can go, but I'm blasting out your license plate number, and if someone else sees you so much as switch lanes without signaling, they'll book you." That guy was a fricking jerk. He had a big old 1980s mustache and aviator shades on. I asked if his nose came off with the stash and glasses. A buddy of mine is a cop and was at a concert doing security, as in he walked in uniform under the pretense of establishing a presence to dissuade unlawful activity. He really just wanted to see Metallica. Anyway, he's there and some guy lights up a doobie right next to him, turns, looks at him, and the exchange goes, "Ah, crap, a cop. Relax. Really, but this is tobacco. It's a hand-rolled tobacco cigarette. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Oh. Do you want some? Get the frick away from me." Not me, but my girlfriend. I was visiting her at her college town, and we were driving around to get some food. She starts to go down this road that's a one-way road, except she's doing the wrong way. And of course, as luck would have it, the car coming towards her is a cop. She's honking at him, not realizing she's the one going the wrong way. The cop puts his lights on and starts walking towards us. He goes through the motions, license, insurance and stuff, and tells her why she's being pulled over and all that, and then she goes, "Oh, so this is why they pulled me over last time." My girlfriend is very chipper and happy-go-lucky, whatever you call it, so she's saying this with the biggest grin on her face. The cop stops for a second and stares at her and then at me with my "oh crap" look on my face. The cop stares at her and then goes, "And you didn't get a ticket last time," and she replies, again, full smile and chipper, "Nope, I guess cops just like me." He walks away, comes back, "Okay, well, be more careful next time." And so we went on our merry way, as I was confused to all heck. I guess cops really do just like her. That sounds like it was just a case of the cop literally not knowing how to react to the situation and just trying to wipe it away from his reality. Nice job. I was driving in Boston, headed to a Bruins game, and I missed the damn turn for the parking garage. I didn't see any cops, so I decided to make an illegal U-turn at the next light. Sure enough, lights go on behind me, and I get pulled over. The officer comes up to my window and hits me with a, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "Yeah, 'cause I'm a butthole." After a good laugh and a warning, he told me to go be a butthole on the other side of the city. I was riding my motorcycle away from the traffic lights at a speed allowed in the area. Admittedly, my engine just revved rather loud. The police officer said, "I've stopped you for speeding." I wasn't speeding. I could tell by the sound of your engine you were speeding. That's absurd. Are you trying to tell me you can tell what speed something is going by the noise? Yes. Okay. I pointed at a plane flying overhead. What speed's that going at then? No ticket, but he wasn't very amused. This wasn't so much smart-ass, but still awesome. I got pulled over by 2 cops, and it turns out there's been some burglaries in the area and they're out looking. They take a look at me and decide I can't be the person they're looking for, but one decides to have some small talk. While we're chatting away, this colleague casually circles my car with a torch. I start to tense up. I have 4 tires balder than Professor X, and if they spot them, they could take away my license on the spot. The searching cop comes back and pulls away the chatty one. Excusing himself, they walk around my car. They look at my tires. I see the chatty one shake his head. Coming back to my window, he says, "Miss..." He can see the look of horror on my face. He knows I'm screwed. "Have you had a look at your tires recently?" My face says it all. He regards me silently, then seems to come to a conclusion. He takes a deep breath and suddenly practically shouts, "Well, they're great tires. Perfect. So much tread left on them, it's insane. Possibly the best tires I've ever seen. Definitely wouldn't insist on going straight to a garage first thing in the morning and getting them all changed." I stared at him for a second, then caught on and replied in a tone equally as loud and deliberate, "Oh, thank you, officer. I promise that I certainly won't go straight to the garage and get 4 brand new ones tomorrow. Have a great evening. Thank you for your time." "You're welcome," he booms and gestures for me to leave. As I look in my mirrors driving away, I see the searching cop gesturing at the chatty one in confusion and annoyance, while my cop just shakes his head and smiles. Legend. I offered the officer a donut from the box on my front seat when he pulled me over due to a burned-out tail light. He took 2, gave me a warning to get it fixed ASAP, and left. What are some of your craziest near-death experiences? I'll explain. I work as a millwright for a company that manufactures automation equipment. Today I was working at a bench near the machine shop when my IT guy came in to install my new shop PC, a speedy little unit armed with a P4, 768 megs of RAM, and one hell of a heart. I know, you're jealous. I leave the bench to go and enter my password on the shiny, new piece of tech and have a few words with him about the sad state of affairs. No more than a minute and a half later, I hear a horrible sound of metal hitting something solid, and then what sounded like someone threw the biggest ninja star in the world across the shop. By the time I looked up, it was past us, and as I turned around, it struck and mangled a shelving unit against the far wall. I ran over to make sure the machinist was okay because he was working on the lathe, and I figured out that was where it came from. The lathe is a machine that can turn pieces of metal at over 1,000 rotations per minute. He was fine, but pretty shaken. Turns out the adjustable dead stop at the rear of the lathe came apart, no fault of his own, at a high speed and hit the floor and went merrily on its way. The dead stop is a 4-foot piece of 1.5-inch solid steel bar, not something to be messed with at 100 miles per hour. It was jammed about half an inch deep into reinforced concrete. The worst part was, I followed the path it took and it was directly over the top of the spot on the bench I was working at. I bought a lotto ticket and a big bottle of Jameson's when I got home. Tonight we drink, because we didn't get decapitated today. I was working at a normal boring office job and I needed to come in on a Saturday to get some work done. So I parked in the parking deck and got in the elevator to go down to the first floor. The elevator was sort of old and crappy and I'd seen people working on it on and off all week. I got in and everything went normally until I reached the first floor. As the elevator settles into place, I hear this loud metallic clanging from somewhere far above me, followed by a loud scraping noise that's obviously something sliding down the side of the shaft at freefall speed. During this, the door starts to open and I'm gripped with indecision as to whether I should leap out of the elevator or take my chances where I am. I decide to run for it, but about half a second later my decision is made for me when a large steel panel, maybe about 4 by 6 feet, flashes guillotine-like through the space between the open elevator door and hits the bottom of the shaft with a thunderous crash. And then I step out of the elevator and the doors close like nothing has happened. And of course, it turned out the door I was trying to use was locked on the weekend, so I had to go back up to where I started from. I took the stairs. It turned out later that the guys doing the work had forgotten to refasten some sort of panel on some machinery. If I'd been half a second faster at deciding what I wanted to do, it would have cut me in half and nobody would have found me until Monday morning. In short, almost got cut in half due to crappy elevator maintenance. I kind of feel like this was your final destination near-death experience and that you should have been very careful going forward. Except, hold on, this post was 12 years ago. No more answers from the author on the story since then. Oh, thank God, he's writing on other things. He's fine, folks. He's fine. 2 weeks ago, I had some weird chest pains and decided to walk to the ER. It got worse as I went, but by then I was pretty close to the place, so I just kept going. I walked in the automatic door and within 4 seconds, I hit the floor. Heart attack. This was at 2:30 in the morning in this dinky little town. If the heart attack had hit me a minute sooner, I would have laid out on the sidewalk and died. They tell me that my heart stopped for 3 minutes. I don't think it would have started up again without the compressions and shock paddles and whatever else they did. If you're going to have a heart attack, I highly recommend having it right there in the ER. We had a loss of depth control on my submarine while in some heavy seas and in not-so-friendly territory. Sunk out very deep and had to use the emergency blow to regain control of depth. One of the dudes in sonar with me started to cry. It was some spooky stuff. Funny enough, the same thing happened to our boat on the east coast. We were somewhere where we weren't supposed to be, and the captain thought that since it was slow and nothing was going on, why not run some drills in prep for ORSA, Operational Safety Exams for the layman's, when we get back. We ran the loss of propulsion drill and the nuclear engineers couldn't get it back up and running, and something broke. We sank out way past recommended depth, and we had to emergency blow to get back up, and we barely made it back to the surface before emptying the tanks. The sonar sup on watch lost it and had to be relieved. I was fire control technician on watch at the time, and nothing is worse than coming up to the surface and not knowing what's out there that could hit us. This happened just today, actually. I'm visiting my eldest brother for the week, and while he's at work today, I decide to go on a bike ride to see the neighborhood. I find his bike and take it and start going down the road. The roads are mostly flat, and I soon find myself going down a side road with lots of bushes and trees on both sides. Then the road starts to become a downwards incline. Not too steep, but steep enough where I'm gaining speed without pedaling. I'm going now at a decent pace and remember that it's an unknown road and I don't have a bike helmet on. I should slow down. The brakes don't seem to be working. Moving faster now. Down the hill, getting steeper. Wait, what the heck? I've got no brakes. At this point in time, I'm really moving fast. I was pretty much going about as fast as someone that was biking all out under their own power on a flat piece of land could go. I look ahead to see if this hill has any plans to flatten out before something bad happens to me. This is a problem. The road ahead, about 25 meters away, takes a sharp turn left. I can't see past that turn, but I can see that it's a downward slope the entire way. I had a choice. Take the turn blind and hope that the road is safe and the hill flattens out, or do something right now to stop my bike before I get to the unknown turn ahead. I decide to do the latter, and aimed for someone's bushes on the side of the road. About 5 seconds later, I slammed into the bushes, moving about, 20 miles per hour? It was a lot more painful than I thought it would be. I got the wind knocked out of me, and was covered with a dozen cuts or so, some of them bleeding through my clothes. As I limp over to drag my bike out of this yard, I get a chance to see what's around that blind corner. After the turn, there was about 10 feet of street and then a stop sign. It then crossed a 4-lane frontage road that was full of cars moving in either direction at high speeds. If I didn't decide to crash into the bushes, I would have taken the turn and found myself moving 20 miles per hour right across 4 lanes of busy traffic. In short, 6 hours ago I made a split-second decision which ended up saving me from slamming into traffic on a bike. I was urban exploring at an abandoned jail during my high school years. We were on the 3rd floor of a building and there was a catwalk that was behind and between the cells, which we decided to explore. Below us was a drop of about 40 to 50 feet to a bunch of mangled metal and concrete in the basement. As I was walking on the catwalk, it rotted off the boards and began to fall downwards. My friend was behind me, luckily, and grabbed me by my hoodie while jumping on the seesawing catwalk. I still owe him to this day, because I'm sure I would have been impaled on something had the fall not killed me. Needless to say, my stupidity would have killed me. I make plastic injection mold, which produce plastic parts for the automotive industry. When two halves are together, they can get pretty huge when making things like the inside door panels or truck grills and whatnot. Anyway, I was once operating an overhead crane trying to separate two halves of the mold, each half being about 10,000 pounds. I was leaning in close because when separating these, the top tends to get cocked, and you need to adjust the position of the crane in small increments to get the weight to come off just right. I was constantly needing to adjust in one direction, which after about 5 seconds started raising some red flags in my head, since that's a pretty extreme adjustment. I looked up and someone was operating the other overhead crane and without knowing it was pushing mine out of position. In the span of time it took me to yell, "Hey, frick, stop!" My crane had been pushed far enough that my load basically sprung off the steel horses and shot towards me. I got super lucky, and the load ended up balanced on the single horse. A few inches either way and it would have fallen off and I might not be here today. It was a pretty scary day. That's a smoke break, right? That's a finish setting down that load and go for a drag outside while exercising a 1,000-yard stare kind of incident at work. No, I don't smoke, but I think I might if that happened. I climb towers in the US, cell phone towers more specifically. As a climber, we're equipped with various safety devices. For climbing a tower, we have a safety climb, which attaches to a metal wire running the length of the ladder. For free climbing, outside of the ladder, we have two pelican hooks, or PFAs, personal fall arrest systems, which are basically two huge carabiners hooked onto a fabric lanyard that's attached to our climbing belt. On top of all of this, we have a number of adjustable lanyards, pelican hooks, and carabiners to make working as safe and smooth as possible. One day, in particular, I was working on a tower in California, roughly 350 feet tall, give or take. Anyone who's been mountain climbing in California knows that it can get windy. Where are the most cell sites located? On mountaintops. Better reception, more range, but not fun to work on when bad weather rolls in. This was one of those days where the weather chose to work against us. We arrived, and as soon as the truck door was flung open wildly by the wind, we knew the day was going to be horrible. There's not much you can do aside from put on all the layers of clothing you have and hope it's enough. I suit up, throw my belt on, and stand at the bottom of the ladder, looking up for a moment and listening to the wind howl as it passes through the various tubes and slots of metal situated on the tower. It's a haunting sound. So we climb the tower, and about 3 hours into work, I move to work on a new antenna. I do the usual, double-check all of my connections and slowly put my weight on said connections so that I can let go of the tower and use my hands to work if I have to. No problem. I sit there working, shifting my weight, occasionally just doing the job. The wind is pulling the tears from my eyes, and my windbreaker hoodie has been flapping like a hummingbird wing in my ears for the entire day. One little shift of my weight and the world drops out from under me. My foot slips. I grab the tower, but I'm falling. I've never fallen so slow. I could clearly see a handhold coming up and remember having the time to consciously think, I can grab this, before my hip slammed into it and my body slid over the side of the metal. I was caught by my armpit. As traumatic as it was, I don't remember much after catching myself. I sat there stunned for a minute and looked up to where I was working. I would guess that I fell roughly 15 to 20 feet. I saw the crossbeam that I was tied off to bent slightly, and when I climbed back to finish the job, I noticed that the nut on the bolt holding the piece in was missing. I'm guessing it de-threaded over time, or maybe it was never there to begin with. More than anything, I remember just being embarrassed. I never told my co-workers. In short, a faulty bolt connection almost killed me on a cell tower. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I almost drowned in a canoe when I was 9. I was under the water for about 30 seconds before my cousin's boyfriend, now husband, pulled me out. I had Kawasaki syndrome when I was 2, and none of the doctors knew what it was, but one random newly graduated med student came in and diagnosed it right away. I don't know who it was, but he saved my life. My brother came extremely close to death. He was 3 and I was 5. We were at our neighbors playing. I was at their pond with my friend and her mum, and my brother was riding a tricycle in the driveway. Their grandpa was a truck driver and had the cab of his truck on the driveway. All of a sudden, I hear my friend's mum screaming and running towards the truck. She's waving her hands and yelling, "Stop!" over and over again. My brother was riding the trike in front of the truck and Grandpa didn't see him. He started it and knocked my brother off the trike and underneath the truck. The Grandpa saw the mum and stopped. My brother had hit his head on something underneath the truck and had tire marks on his head and arm where the tires brushed up against him. If the Grandpa hadn't stopped exactly when he did, my brother would have been run over. The Grandpa stopped driving trucks after this happened because he felt so bad. He had to change his career after that? That's a profound change. I know the majority of our parents didn't give up driving after the many times that their kids got in front of the family sedans on our tricycles and skateboards. I'm a manufacturing manager in Texas. I've seen a machinist working on an automated lathe with his shirt untucked. The lathe malfunctioned and started operating when he was working on it, and caught his shirt. He was pulled up and over for about 20 times until someone could shut it off. He can't walk anymore. When I was about 4, I was waiting in the line to jump into the ocean off a dock in Jakarta, when a little rude French boy jumped into the water right as I was supposed to. He ended up jumping on a man-of-war jellyfish and nearly died. If that had been me, I was so little I would have died. During officer training in the German army, my class and I received training on our assigned weapon systems. I'm with Armored Recon, so mine is, or was, since it's been phased out a few years ago, an 8-wheeled reconnaissance tank with a 20mm machine cannon for self-defense. This is some serious hardware, dealing out 20mm high-explosive rounds with a kill radius of 6 meters at 1,000 rounds per minute. They're pin-fired and the primer needs about 70 newtons, that's 70 kilograms of force, to ignite the charge. That will become important later on. So I'm tasked with loading the gun for some live firing as fast as possible, since we're already behind schedule. Now, the ammo comes in 25-round belts, which have to be linked and fed into the storage compartment inside the turret. This process is done by one person sitting inside. There are special tools to pull out single rounds, overlap 2 links and connect the 2 belts with the spare round. These have to be used for safety reasons. I, being young and dumb but ambitious, of course choose to ignore all safety precautions because it's faster that way. The high-explosive storage compartment is at about knee level in front of me and holds about 300 rounds. I'm trying to link the final belt to the snake-like chain of death half a meter away from my crotch, but the round I have to pull out is stuck in the link. I apply all my strength, but this is stuck, man. For a second, I contemplate using the special pair of pliers designed exactly for this task. Nah. I pull again with the belt against my shins, pulling the round towards me for maximum leverage. It suddenly comes free. Unable to stop the motion because of the surprise, my hand and ammo combo move between my legs at the speed of sound. No, it didn't hit my Johnson, but the base of the round, where the primer is, struck the edge of the steel storage container under the seat I was occupying, with the loudest frickin' clang I have ever heard. I pause. Silence. 5 seconds pass. 10 seconds pass. A bead of sweat rolls down my chin. I finally managed to move my arm again. I look at the base of the round. Around 2 millimeters, that's 1/10 of an inch, next to the primer, is a huge fricking dent, twice that deep. What I'm trying to say is, a bit more to the left and that thing would have gone off in my hand, sending shrapnel and burning powder right into the ammo storage, where 299 rounds of live 20mm high-explosive ammo was sitting. That, combined with the 500 liters of diesel fuel in the tank, would have provided quite a spectacular fireworks display. I presume, anyway. Maybe they would have found my teeth. Terribly sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but your son is dead because he was a freaking moron. There are more instances where I almost died, getting shot, squashed, or decapitated during training, but this one was the one with the most profound impact on me. In short, almost blew myself, 300 rounds of 20mm ammo, and a recon tank up due to stupidity. And that, sweet viewers, is why the narrator isn't in any of the armed forces. I wouldn't even make it to contact with the enemy, because something like this would have happened the first time I was allowed near anything more dangerous than a wooden practice rifle. Several years back, I worked as an electrician's apprentice. We were rewiring an industrial printing press. If you haven't seen one, those things are massive. This one was 30 feet tall and about 200 feet long. On this particular day, we had to rewire a portion of the master control unit. This involved pulling out like 300 feet of wire and then rerunning it. The guy who I apprenticed under told me that the power had been locked out of that side of the press. This is for safety because you can't have people working around live wires that run industrial currents. This is where my whole day started to turn to crap. Being an apprentice, I said, okay, and trusted him. Note to self, never trust someone again when your life is on the line. So here I am on top of the printing press pulling this wire out. They run the wires in a gutter-like thing to keep all of the wiring neat and out of the way. The gutter was run over the press and then down to the master control unit. So I'm pulling the wire and having a pretty good day so far. Then the wire gets stuck on something. Okay, I'll just put some oomph into it. It didn't budge. Now, let me clarify exactly where I am right now. The press is 30 feet high, and it has a catwalk around the top of it to access certain parts of it for service. The catwalk has a standard metal handrail, so people don't fall off it. I, being the naturally smart person that I am, have one foot on top of the press, and the other foot is on the handrail. I'm standing precariously on these about 30 to 35 feet in the air, and I'm reaching up to this metal gutter and pulling wires that are stuck. Well damn, this sucks. A light bulb goes off in my head. Screw it, I'll just cut it and pull this half out right here. And this is where the defecation hits the ventilation. So it turns out the guy I apprenticed under was either A, incompetent, or B, a jerk of mythic proportions. So here I am, precariously balanced, and I cut the wire. I can only describe what happened next as a dream. Time literally slowed down like in a movie. Slow motion, zzzz. I can feel my body buzzing from the shock, yet I don't actually feel pain. The next thing I know, I'm looking at the sky. It's so pretty. I see the clouds, weird but pretty. I stare at the sky for a few minutes. Then it turns into the Far Side comic of Custard's Last Sight. Basically, I see a circle of heads all around me and people look scared. Well, that's kinda weird. I sit up and let me tell you, I felt frickin' great. So full of energy. No pun intended. I've never felt better. Everyone is slack-jawed and staring, and no one says anything. After a few minutes, I look up at the top of the press where I was. Something tickles my memory. Why is that familiar? Slowly it dawns on me that I was doing something up there recently. Another minute passes and it all becomes clear. The buzzing, the body shaking, the sky. I look down and my hands are all bloody, and so is my leg. Finally, one of the guys says, "Holy frick, dude." Yes, my good man, holy frick indeed. It turns out that after getting hit with 480 volts, I fell backwards 30 feet, bounced off a 6-foot steel cabinet, landed on my head, and flopped onto my back. I'm bleeding from where the electricity went in and from where it shot out, as well as several cuts from the cabinet. The ambulance arrives, I go to the hospital, only the few minor cuts, no real damage. Doctors and paramedics couldn't believe I wasn't dead from the electricity or the fall. Good times. In short, got electrocuted, fell 35 feet onto my head, and walked away with only a few minor cuts. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.